In 1952, an Air Force plane called C-124 Globemaster II crashed into a big mountain while flying from Washington to Alaska. Sadly, everyone on board, 52 people in total, didn't make it. The bad weather at the time made it hard to find the crash site, and even later, any attempts to locate it failed. But in 2012, a helicopter crew doing a training mission spotted the pieces of the crashed plane on a glacier called Colony Glacier in Alaska. They started looking for more pieces and confirmed it was indeed the missing plane. Since then, every summer for about a decade, different military groups have been helping in an operation called Colony Glacier. They've managed to identify 40 out of the 52 people whose lives were lost in the crash. The soldiers taking part in this mission take their promise seriously to never leave a fallen comrade behind. They believe it's their duty to bring back those who didn't make it. Another discovery comes from the Alps. In 1991, some hikers exploring the picturesque Alps stumbled upon a human body. It was half frozen in ice at the top of a mountain pass between Italy and Austria. At first, the local police thought it might be a mountaineering accident. But in a few weeks, archaeologists started claiming that this guy might have lived more than 5,000 years ago. They eventually gave the frozen fellow the nickname Ötzi. He was named after the nearby Ötztal Valley. He's become quite famous as the oldest ice mummy on record. Ötzi's frozen state might not be as unique as we thought, and that's where things get really cool. Archaeologists have another theory. See, at first, everyone was convinced that Ötzi marked the start of a cooler period because he had been frozen in the ice without any interruptions since he had lost his life. Yet, over the past few decades, glaciers and ice patches worldwide have been melting away like ice cream on a hot summer day. Not just Ötzi, but other ancient relics like bodies, hunting gear, horse droppings, and even ancient skis started to appear. So, archaeologists say there are similar sites. They found quite a few, and they all fit perfectly into this growing field of glacial archaeology. It seems like as the world warms up, it will show even more ancient secrets from the deep freeze. Moving on to another amazing discovery. In 2018, William Taylor and Nick Jarman were exploring the snowy slopes of Mongolia's Altai Mountains. They found an ancient treasure trove hidden in the ice. Inside the trove, they found a well-preserved 3,000-year-old arrow shaft adorned with ochre markings. It was in pristine condition, a rarity for organic items that old. They found other items too, like a bronze arrowhead with bits of animal sinew still attached. All of these relics had been untouched for hundreds of years, since they had been locked in the ice. In Mongolia, rising temperatures have melted ice patches that remained frozen for centuries. Similar discoveries have been made in the Yukon, US, Italy, Siberia, and Norway. Thousands of sites have been identified. Yet, scientists are racing against time to document and preserve these artifacts before they're lost forever. The study of these artifacts challenges the definition of these environments as wildernesses and shows how indigenous people coexisted with nature there. Sometimes people find simple items too, as simple as a sandal. This one, discovered on one of central Norway's mountain passes, indicates that people used this route roughly 1,700 years ago. This suggests that there was less snow and ice in that area back then. The sandal, dating back to around 300 BCE, resembles Roman sandals of that era. Again, in Norway, hunters found an iron sword high up on a mountain, more than 5,250 feet above sea level. There's no nearby burial site, and it's puzzling why someone would have a sword in such a remote location. Archaeologists speculate that the owner might have become lost. Then, in 2011, unusual objects resembling giant slingshots began to emerge as the ice melted. Radiocarbon dating suggests that this particular object was crafted around 400 BCE. It measures over 3 feet long and has knife cuts. Those puzzled archaeologists until one team member recognized them as tang, or pliers, used to secure loads on sleds when transporting hay or leaving for animal food. People in the area used hay sleds with pliers until the 1950s, when tractors became more common. Now, let's get back in time to thousands of years ago. We can easily do that by looking at this woolly mammoth. This creature looks a bit like a cherished but slightly worn-out toy. This ancient giant, whose heyday was 39,000 years ago, is the best-preserved mammoth ever found. Even its signature shaggy hair is surprisingly well-preserved, having been trapped in glacial ice until its recent discovery in Siberia. This remarkable animal is stepping into the limelight in Yokohama, Japan. Scientists are running tests that might bring this extinct species back to life. When they stumbled upon this female mammoth, they uncovered a hidden treasure, a sample of her blood preserved beneath the ice. So they believe this ancient blood could hold the key to resurrecting the mammoth. They also found well-preserved muscle tissue. She was between 50 and 60 years old when she met her icy fate. The discovery of mammoth blood has reignited debates about the ethics of bringing back extinct creatures, like in Jurassic Park. Their ambitious plan is to implant an egg into a living elephant for a 22-month pregnancy, hoping that at least one living mammoth cell might survive. Hop on, we're going to the French Alps. We are at a spot not far from where an Air India plane tragically crashed 46 years ago. We're accompanied by a diligent mountain rescuer and his neighbor. They went to this area after a bunch of tourists had noticed a strange-looking thingy on a glacier. It was a bag. The Indian embassy in Paris got wind of it, and it was all set on getting that bag. What makes it kinda cool is that it had diplomatic mail and Ministry of External Affairs written on it. The Air India flight was on its way from Mumbai to New York when it took a nosedive in January 1966. It took 117 people on board down with it. Guess what else was inside the bag besides the soaked diplomatic mail? It had a stack of old Indian newspapers. So, alongside those, they also found bits of the plane's cabin, a lone shoe, and a bunch of cables. Totally unexpected treasures on that mountain. During the summer of 2013, scientists stumbled upon a message left behind by a geologist named Walker, who had placed it there 44 years before. That message sort of served as the man's last testament. He passed away just a month after hiding the bottle in the rocks on the island. The content of the message was quite astounding. In 1959, Walker had measured the distance from those very stones to the glacier's edge, and it clocked in at a mere 167 feet. By 2013, that distance had ballooned to 400 feet. Researchers are convinced that this stark contrast between the two measurements underscores the consequences of ongoing global warming. Imagine the melting ice in Norway's mountains as a time machine revealing a treasure trove. Nearly 800 Viking artifacts tucked away for over 1,000 years have been unearthed. They give us a peek into the bustling trade networks of the Viking era and the critical role of the mountain passes in this ancient commerce. Among the finds are leather shoes, cozy woolen mittens, stylish tunics, feathered arrowheads, horseshoes, walking sticks, and kitchen gadgets from the Viking chef's toolkit. There are even Viking pack horse souvenirs. These artifacts provide us with insights into ancient travel habits and the peak times when those paths were bustling with activity, and give us a glimpse into the lives of adventurers.
Feel that? The ground is shaking beneath your feet. Leaves are falling from trees. It feels as if a mini earthquake happens every few seconds. Bam! Bam! Something's coming right out of the woods towards you. There it is! The first thing you see is giant tusks and a long trunk. Then the creature's entire body emerges from the forest. This is the woolly mammoth. The species went extinct about 4,000 years ago, but now it's right in front of you. And it's not a dream. It might become possible in the nearest future. People are going to try to bring these animals back to life, and a group of scientists is already working on it. So, woolly mammoths appeared about 450,000 years ago in Siberia. Later on, they also settled in North America. Real estate was cheaper then. Then these animals took over Asia and even Europe. These guys were the tallest land animals during the last ice age. They were about 11.5 feet tall. That's as tall as a one-story cottage. That's also 1.5 feet taller than the height of the average modern elephant. But mammoths were much more massive. They weighed about 8 tons, compared to the 6 tons of an elephant. That's like 2 or even 3 big SUVs. Good thing they couldn't drive. Mammoths were so heavy because they had larger heads, as well as longer and more curved tusks. These animals lived in the cold tundra. That's why they needed a layer of fat that was at least as thick as a shoebox. But even that wasn't enough to withstand the cold. So mammoths had dense wool that grew to be as long as a cell phone charger cord. In the winter, the wool on the sides and belly of the mammoth formed something like a skirt, so the animal could lie in the snow and it didn't freeze. Mammoths spent most of their time looking for food, like me. To build up that thick layer of fat and keep their body temperature constant, they needed to eat about 400 pounds of food per day. That's the weight of 2 wild boars. But mammoths were herbivores, which means they ate grass and willow or pine branches. But after the Ice Age, the warming began. The tundra, where mammoths live, began to turn into swamps. The amount of food was decreasing. This caused a drop in the population of woolly mammoths. And now, scientists want to bring mammoths back to life. Using genetic engineering, they hope to recreate the mammoth using its DNA. Of course, this doesn't mean they will create the animal from scratch in a lab. First of all, they need a creature that resembles the woolly mammoth as much as possible. The answer is the Asian elephant. Both the mammoth and the elephant came from the same common ancestor millions of years ago. Their DNA is 99.6% the same. So, scientists only need to add several missing genes to the elephant DNA. This will provide them with fur, necessary fat, long tusks, a large domed head, and other distinctive mammoth features. And the best news is that we do have the mammoth DNA. These animals lived in colder parts of our planet with never-ending winter. This eternal refrigerator has preserved not only mammoth bones, but also their genetic material. Scientists have managed to identify about 60 specific genomes that can help recreate mammoths. The most difficult step is to bring this creature into the world. One option is to remove some DNA elements from an elephant's egg and replace them with mammoth DNA. But this would require a surrogate elephant mother. It would carry the baby for about 2 years, and then the first mammoth would be born. But scientists question this option. Creating a herd of mammoths would take decades and require too many surrogate mothers. Another option is to make an artificial womb. Nowadays, there are successful cases of creating a sac in which an embryo can safely develop. The main problem here is the sac itself. It has to be large and strong enough. It'll hold a developing mammoth baby for 2 years. In the end of this period, it'll have to withstand the weight of about 200 pounds. But it's also important to remember that elephants live in a matriarchal society, just like mammoths did. And when an elephant is born, the first thing it sees is its mother. Their connection remains strong for many years as the baby elephant grows. So many people say that such a way of growing a mammoth is highly unethical. But scientists continue their research. They insist that their goal is to improve the already existing genetic engineering technologies and apply them in the future. This way, we can save endangered animal species. But why should we bring woolly mammoths back to life in the first place? Some scientists believe that these animals played an important role in the planet's ecosystem. These days, the tundras of Siberia and North America are gradually warming up and releasing a lot of carbon dioxide. This contributes to the greenhouse effect, which warms up our planet even more. These tundras are now heavily overgrown with moss. But thousands of years ago, when woolly mammoths roamed these areas, tundras were more like pastures. Mammoths trampled moss and felled trees. They were some sort of ecosystem engineers. It's believed that the return of mammoths to these areas might help bring them back to their original state. Restored pastures will keep the soil from eroding. They may even be enough to decrease the production of harmful carbon dioxide. Recently, ecologists have brought many bison and other animal species to the vast expanses of Siberia for the same purpose, but some scientists believe that woolly mammoths would do a much better job. If this experiment turns out to be successful, people would have an opportunity to bring back to life a huge number of extinct animal species. Unfortunately, there's a limit to how long animal DNA can survive in fossils. If these fossils are hidden a few feet underground, DNA can last from 1,000 to 10,000 years. If the fossils, let's say, are in the ice in the Antarctic, DNA can remain intact for several 100,000 years. Unfortunately, it means we would never be able to recreate dinosaurs. They went extinct about 66 million years ago, and people just don't have any access to their DNA. But we could bring back some animals that disappeared not so long ago, like moa. It's a species of flightless birds. The largest of them was as tall as the woolly mammoth and weighed as much as a scooter, but the smallest species could be the size of a turkey. They lived in New Zealand and were isolated from the outside world for almost 80 million years, but they became extinct after the first people arrived there. Or Steller sea cow. This was the largest aquatic mammal after whales. These sea cows were as long as a limousine, and they weighed more than African elephants. Steller sea cows had a very lazy lifestyle. They lived near the shore and ate algae, mostly seaweed. Scientists believe they didn't even know how to dive. Even though elephant birds were indeed birds, they couldn't fly. These creatures were twice as tall as an ostrich and weighed 10 times as much as the average person. They lived in Madagascar and, like ostriches, laid eggs. Although elephant birds became extinct almost 1,000 years ago, people still find their eggs. Scientists managed to get the DNA of these animals and analyze it. It turns out that the closest relative of the elephant bird is the kiwi. It's another kind of non-flying bird about the size of a domestic chicken. Pinta Island tortoises used to rest for 16 hours a day. They also drank a lot of water and could store it like camels. Each animal has its own role in the ecosystem, as well as in the food chain. The disappearance of one animal can cause huge problems for others. Such a chain reaction can wipe out an entire ecosystem. For example, dinosaurs didn't disappear instantly after the meteorite collided with Earth. The impact caused fires all over the planet. This decreased the amount of food for plant-eating dinosaurs. When they disappeared, meat-eating dinosaurs began to starve. And then all dinos gradually vanished off the face of the Earth. Many scientists think people do need genetic engineering technologies that can bring back extinct species. The pace of climate change on the planet is getting too fast for some animals to keep up with it and survive. Human intervention in this process could save many lives. This technology might also help recreate people if something happened and all life on Earth got wiped out. If we could preserve our DNA, our species could be brought back to life. By who? Antarctica. It was once a green land full of dinosaurs, but now it's a frozen continent bigger than that of the US that doesn't belong to anyone. It isn't hard to find. Wherever you go, just go south until you get to the big icy thing at the south pole of our planet. It lies within the Antarctic Circle, and it's the largest single mass of ice on Earth. The continent is bigger than the US and even bigger than all of Europe. And still, Antarctica was officially discovered recently. Scientists hadn't known of its existence until 1820. After the discovery, it took another 2 decades to confirm it was a whole new continent, and a few more decades after that to decide on a name. In Antarctica, anti means the opposite, so Antarctica literally means the opposite of the Arctic. Now, even before scientists discovered the land, ancient Greeks already theorized that there must be a southern continent to balance out the Arctic in the north. Also, some scientists who studied Polynesian artwork and oral history believe that Polynesians found the continent over a millennia before the Europeans did. Anyways, today we all know of this icy land at the South Pole. Because of its location, there are just 2 seasons there, summer and winter, and both last 6 months. In summer, it's a bit warmer, and the continent exists in pure daylight. And in winter, it's dark all day long. 98% of Antarctica is ice. This continent alone stores 60% of the planet's fresh water. And yet, despite all those water reserves, Antarctica is the biggest desert in the world. By definition, a desert is an area with sparse vegetation and little snow or rain. Notice that plenty of sand isn't a necessary condition here, even though the continent does have some sand and even sand dunes. It also gets a lot of wind. Antarctica is the windiest continent on Earth, and wind speeds can reach 200 miles per hour. That's even faster than hurricane winds. The little snow the land gets never melts. It just builds up over time, for centuries and millennia. So there's a thick ice layer there. This makes Antarctica full of hidden secrets. There's a whole new world underneath its ice. For example, there are a lot of mountains on the continent that are like 9,000 feet tall. It's taller than 3 Burj Khalifas stacked on top of each other, if we must, and that's currently the tallest skyscraper in the world. But we don't see all those mountains because they're all hidden under the ice sheet that's almost 16,000 feet thick. There's also a lake down there, beneath over 11,000 feet of snow. The lake is called Lake Vostok, named after Vostok Research Station, under which it's located. Originally, it was just a hypothesis. Over a century ago, a scientist suggested that the huge pressure created by tons of ice could decrease the melting point of ice in the lowest layers of the ice sheet, creating liquid water, which could form a lake. He didn't prove his ideas in his lifetime, but others continued his work and confirmed that this theory was true. There's also a canyon in Antarctica, hidden underneath huge masses of snow too. It's deeper than the Grand Canyon we have in Arizona. There is a mountain range that divides the continent into 2 parts, East Antarctica and West Antarctica. The western part of the continent is experiencing higher temperatures and is starting to melt. If West Antarctica melts and releases its stored water, it will raise the average global sea level by about 16 feet. That will be enough for some cities all over the world to completely disappear. Perhaps the first to turn into a water world will be Thailand's capital Bangkok, which is just 5 feet above sea level. Then it will be Amsterdam in the Netherlands, followed by Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, Cardiff in the UK, and New Orleans in the US. People do a lot of work in Antarctica now, residing there for many months at a time to study this mystery of a continent. Over the years, even a few children were born there. But it's not a country, and the land doesn't belong to anyone. It's governed by the Antarctic Treaty System, an agreement of peaceful research and collaboration that suspends all territorial claims. It was first signed by 12 nations, and now there are 59 supporters, half of whom have decision-making powers. The continent is occupied all year round by researchers from all over the world. There are about 5,000 people living there in summer and about 1,000 in winter. Yet no one is a permanent resident there. People come and go, and the scientists take turns spending time there. The average yearly temperature there is negative 30 degrees. But there was a time when Antarctica was about as warm as Melbourne, Australia is today. It was about 40 to 50 million years ago. I wasn't around then. But the continent had green forests and dinosaurs roaming its land, chilling in the sun in a 63-degree Fahrenheit environment. That was before penguins. In our age, it's so cold that you won't even find any trees or bushes in Antarctica, just the snow. The only plants that can thrive in such extreme temperatures are lichens, moss, and algae. People can't stand such freezing conditions for lengthy periods of time either. So the continent has never had any indigenous population. Well, that is, if we don't count penguins, seals, whales, and a few other types of birds that live there now. Antarctica's fauna is the scariest and least diverse on the planet because only a few organisms can withstand its harsh conditions and because non-natives aren't allowed to be brought there. So, if you decide to travel to Antarctica with your cat, well, you can't. Hey, I don't make the rules. But those few species that live on the South Pole totally own the place. There are no more than 5,000 people there and around 20 million penguins. They are a kind of settlers, though. Penguins' first ancestors lived in Australia and New Zealand. There are still a few penguin species there, including the smallest penguin on Earth that is just 1 foot tall. Still, most of the penguins migrated to Antarctica at some point, possibly because they were attracted by the greater food supply there. It's not the cold that made them like the land. It turns out, most penguins leave the continent when the summer ends. The only ones that stay there are male emperor penguins, and they do it to warm and protect eggs left by their mates. But where do all the other penguins go? At first, it was a big mystery even to scientists. But then they attached some tiny location devices to the legs of a few of these animals and figured it out. Penguins go to live in the southern oceans while it's too cold in Antarctica. None of them go ashore for half a year until they get back to the continent. When they come back, it's when those eggs, left for male penguins to nurture, start hatching, and so penguin families can be together when it happens. Penguins eat different fish, and the ocean is full of those despite its cold temperature. In some areas, water can reach below freezing temperatures because it's salty. But fish don't freeze there because they have antifreeze proteins in their bodies. Then there are also about 1 million seals in Antarctica. They like fish too, and they can hold their breath underwater for 2 hours. They see way better underwater than in the bright light of the day, and they also use their whiskers to locate food. Their breathing holes in the ice can freeze while seals are away, and they must use their teeth to make a new one. Seals can even sleep underwater and then resurface occasionally to get some air without waking up. I can appreciate that.
Meet Otzi, or the Iceman, a natural mummy. He lived sometime between 3,350 and 3,105 BCE. He was discovered in 1991 in the Ostal Alps, near the borders of Austria and Italy, and yes, the nickname derives from the name of the mountain. Otzi is Europe's oldest known naturally mummified human. Otzi was 40-something when it happened. Science is awesome. We even know that he was left-handed and lactose intolerant. He was wearing shoes stuffed with grass and laced with aurochs leather. He also had a fur hat and carried a backpack with everything he needed to quickly make a fire. His body is now kept in a special room at a constant temperature of -21 degrees Fahrenheit. These days, Otzi is kind of a celebrity, featured in numerous documentaries and books. A decades-old mystery is solved. In 1942, Marceline and Francine Dumoulin left their home in southwestern Switzerland to get some food, but they never returned. No one knew what had happened to them. A ski resort worker solved the mystery 75 years later. He found 2 people dressed in 1940s fashion in ice. DNA tests revealed that they were the exact married couple. The couple had 7 children. After their parents' disappearance, the children never stopped looking for them. One of the children, Audrey Dumoulin, said she wouldn't wear black to the ceremony. She thought that white would be more appropriate since it represented hope, which she never lost. I'll take you back to 2016, an ordinary summer day. A gold miner was traveling in search of gold in Canada. He spotted something in the melting ice. He got closer. A treasure greeted him. Well, a treasure for science. The miner found the oldest and most complete wolf mummy ever discovered in the world. This wolf was part of an ecosystem that no longer exists today. The local people named the 57,000-year-old pup Zur, meaning wolf in their language. Experts have been able to get a glimpse of what Zur's life was like thousands of years ago. They've discovered that she mainly ate fish and other seafood instead of large mammals. Previously, scientists assumed that Yukon wolves mainly fed on bison or musk oxen during the Ice Age. You're hiking Mont Blanc in the French Alps. You see a small metal box blinking at you from under the ice. You slowly approach it. Oh, it's full of jewelry worth $340,000. This is a real story. The person who found the box handed it to the police. It turned out that there were hundreds of diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and sapphires inside. The markings said, "Made in India." Police already knew there were 2 major incidents regarding Indian Airways around the area, but they dated back to 1950 and 1966. The box had been hidden under the ice for at least 5 decades. Experts couldn't identify the owner of the previous gems. They believed that the box belonged to a passenger who was going to New York to sell the jewels. Well, let's hope the buyer didn't make any prepayment. Every year, new stuff comes to the surface in the area when ice melts. For instance, newspapers with headlines from the time when Gandhi became India's prime minister. Climbers also routinely find luggage and other personal items there. Let's travel 39,000 years back in time. Meet Yucca, the woolly mammoth. Yucca is special because it's the best preserved mammoth ever found. Local tusk hunters discovered it in 2010. Yucca became a natural mummy thanks to the ice preserving it. Scientists made analyses that revealed that Yucca was a 6-year-old female mammoth. Now, how about some ice worms? Yes, those do exist. They live on glacial ice in Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. They spend their whole life on ice. You can see them on the surface of glaciers 2 times a day, in the evening and in the morning. They go up to feed on snow algae. Scientists call them a scientific paradox. When temperatures are low, any creature's bodily reactions slow down and energy levels drop. Cold-blooded creatures like worms become sluggish when it gets too cold. But the laws of nature don't seem to apply to ice worms. They thrive and are very active when it's freezing cold. But as glaciers are melting, ice worms' habitats disappear too. Ice worms can be up to 1 inch long and are black or blue in color. Fun fact, there are stories and songs about them. Supposedly, they give glaciers' ice their blue color, but it's just a myth. This horned lark is an Ice Age animal, not the cartoon, the actual one. Local fossil ivory hunters found this frozen lark in Siberia in 2018. Luckily, they notified experts about their discovery. After the examination, scientists found out that the bird had lived around 46,000 years ago. The most interesting thing is that the bird was in such good shape, considering that it had been under ice for millions of years. Experts say that the lark looked as if whatever had happened to it occurred just a few days ago. Turns out, the bird lived in the same era as other Ice Age animals, for example, mammoths. This book was lost for decades. It belonged to George Murray Levick, a surgeon and photographer. In 1910, he was on an expedition to Antarctica. Levick and his teammates spent months observing penguins, but they had to drop everything due to harsh weather conditions. Levick and his team were trapped in the area. They survived by digging a tight ice cave. Eventually, a ship managed to get to a nearby location and they were saved. But Levick left his notebook behind. It had lists of dates, subjects, and photographs he took at Cape Adare. Most pages of the book got dissolved, yet experts managed to save what was left of it. The notebook was published a century after it had been written. Look at this bone. It belongs to a scimitar cat. The bone was found in Klondike, Alaska. What makes it unique is that scientists managed to extract DNA from it. They found out it was a pre-Ice Age animal, more than 50,000 years old. Scientists used to assume there weren't any scimitar cats in the world, but this bone debunked previous theories. Plus, researchers found out that these cats had had natural hunting abilities, good eyesight, and endurance for long-distance running. At one point in the past, the number of animals the cats hunted started to decline, and ultimately, scimitar cats were outcompeted and eventually disappeared. Not just iceworms, but also viruses live in ice. Researchers revived 33 types of ancient viruses, which had been frozen 15,000 years ago. 28 of them were unknown to science. It might sound a bit scary, but scientists say that these viruses are unlikely to harm people. You can put your doomsday pack aside. Before, viruses even older than these ones were revived without any problems. For instance, in 2014, scientists found a virus that was around 30,000 years old in, guess where? Yes, Siberia. But microbes that can cause problems do concern scientists. For example, after a heat wave in 1941, bacteria got out of a frozen reindeer carcass trapped under Siberian permafrost. Several people living in a nearby village were hospitalized because of the effects of the virus. Who knows what other viruses can be trapped in older permafrost layers? Well, let's hope they remain where they are. Fingers crossed. Bonus: in the 1960s, an underground facility was built in Denmark. The details of the project were first revealed only in 1995. When the facility was decommissioned in 1967, its infrastructure and waste were left untouched. Authorities probably thought that the facility would be forever entombed by snow and ice. But studies claim otherwise. When the ice melts, the camp will reappear, and so will everything in it. Let's hope nothing unpleasant comes to the surface.
A colossal iceberg, more giant than a city, broke away from Antarctica in mid-2021. It's so big that it's 40 times bigger than Paris and 73 times the size of Manhattan. Imagine that you come out of your small holiday shack on the coast of South Africa, near the town of Port Elizabeth. You have a cup of tea in your hand as you've just woken up. You stand near the edge of your lookout, the vast Indian Ocean before you. Something catches your eye. To the right, there is something so monumental, you can't comprehend it. It's a giant slab of ice, 300 feet high, and stretching away many miles, as far as the eye can see. It rolls slowly, but relentlessly on, heading out into the deep sea. If it goes far enough, it could reach the western coast of Australia. Playing in front of it are a pod of dolphins, like they sometimes do off the bow of a ship. Yet they're just specks compared to the mammoth size. You're so shocked that you drop your cup. Your eyes are as big as saucers. It's like something out of a science fiction movie. Are you dreaming? Are you seeing things? Nope. It's A76. It's real, and it's currently on the move. What could happen to it is anyone's guess. Well, scientists have a few theories, but let's get a grasp of its size first. The iceberg is 110 miles long and 16 miles wide. It's basically the shape of a gigantic finger. If you were standing at the coast of Dover, looking across the English Channel toward France, the iceberg would be almost as wide. The channel is 21 miles across at its narrowest. That means approximately 2/3 of that distance would be filled with the iceberg. That's if it were drifting, finger pointing down, so to speak. If it were facing the other way, it could still enter the English Channel, but as it got closer to the narrowest points, it would smash into the coasts of both England and France. It would go up over land. It would slide over the green fields of England, the white ice bold against the rich green. It would cruise past the vineyards of France. It was temporarily lowering the temperature of everything around it. Those grapes would be like jelly crystals. It would skim right over highways, cars stopping to observe this colossal thing like a visitor from another galaxy. You could pluck chunks off it for your drink as it sailed past. Failing that, you could scale it and go ice climbing, right on the outskirts of London. It would certainly be handy in the summer. But let's get back to what actually happened, and what scientists think will happen to it. As of the beginning of 2022, A76 is the world's most giant floating iceberg. It was calved from the Filchner Ronne ice shelf in Antarctica in the middle of May 2021. Ice calving, also known as glacier calving, is the breaking up of ice chunks from the edge of a glacier. It then pulls away from the ice mass into a separate entity. If you were nearby, you would hear a lot of cracking and a massive booming sound. Blocks of ice up to 200 feet would break free and crash into the water. It would cause huge waves. Not even adventurous surfers would want to tackle those breakers. Ice calving is a natural event. The area where A76 broke off has seen little change in recent decades. There have been even larger chunks of ice than A76, but this one is currently the largest in the world. Scientists at the British Antarctic Survey spotted it. There are satellite images of it breaking free, as captured by the European Space Agency's Sentinel-1A satellite. The size at the calving was an estimated 1,670 square miles. Right now, it's in the Weddell Sea around Antarctica. The Weddell Sea is part of the Southern Ocean. It was named after the Scottish sailor James Weddell, who entered the area in 1823. Scientists have deemed the Weddell Sea to have the clearest water of any sea. Imagine peering down into its depths from a boat. What a fantastic view it must be. The area is full of whales and seals. As you look down, you may see killer whales, humpback whales, minke whales, leopard seals, and crab-eater seals. And if you look towards land, you'll likely see a colony of Adelie penguins. They're the dominant penguin species in this area because they adapt to the harsh environment. In fact, this is the only location in the world they live. What an incredible array of wildlife to observe, all from the comfort of the ship's deck, while you drink another cup of hot tea. It gets pretty cold in these parts. To get an idea of what could happen to A76, scientists refer to other data, such as the even more enormous iceberg called A68. It was calved from the ice shelf known as Larsen C off Antarctica in 2017. While it may be exciting, though a little daunting, to think of it also sailing up the English Channel, A68 floated out to warmer seas and, by early 2021, had all but dissipated. That was a relatively quick demise. Some icebergs have been observed floating around for up to 18 years. Suppose they remain in the relatively cold waters. It all depends on where A76 decides to go. Satellites have helped scientists keep track of these monstrous movements, whereas they would go unnoticed in the past. That's how they know that by day 148, this iceberg had split into 3 fragments, imaginatively titled A76A, A76B, and A76C. The numbers might be boring, but they're based on the Antarctic quadrant in which they were first sighted. If these enormous chunks do break up entirely, it will not add to rising sea levels because it was already part of the floating ice shelf. Imagine these ice chunks in your glass. They already take up a certain amount of space. They will simply change form into water. Icebergs like this one are different from glaciers or ice sheets found on land. Those are the things that help to raise sea levels when they break off and melt. For example, if the whole of Antarctica's ice sheet were to melt, it could raise sea levels by nearly 190 feet. If you think A76 is enormous, and it clearly is, there was another that makes it look small in comparison. On record, the largest iceberg was sighted in November of 1956, 150 miles west of Scott Island in the South Pacific Ocean. Ironically, it was seen by a ship known as the USS Glacier. It was sized over 12,000 square miles. This iceberg was larger than the country of Belgium. What may happen to the chunks of A76 will depend on a few factors. Ocean currents can make a significant impact, and wind direction and speed can too. They may move closer to coastlines, where they can freeze into pack ice. They can also drift into shallow waters and hit the seabed, called seabed gouging. The deepest part of the iceberg can act like the keel of a boat. It digs into the ocean floor, but the sheer size of the iceberg keeps it moving. Soon it's tearing up the floor, creating a long, narrow furrow or a gouge. Fish would scatter, the earth would shake, the noise would be tremendous. It's actually quite common in offshore environments near where ice is found. You would not want to be scuba diving nearby when one of these rips through. However, it would make for a spectacular sight. Generally, icebergs deteriorate through melting and fracturing, which, as you can imagine, changes the mass and the surface area. Combined with wind and ocean currents, it can make iceberg modeling difficult. As for A76, we'll just have to wait and see. Before we go, let's return to our imaginary voyage down the English Channel. The island of ice, 73 times the size of Manhattan, with its gigantic frosty finger pointed down toward the Celtic Sea, rolling steadily onwards, unable to be stopped. Hundreds of thousands of people have flocked to the coasts of both England and France to watch this extraordinary spectacle as it cruises by. On top of the ice, there are thousands of penguins playing happily. They almost look to be waving back to the abundance of sightseers who cheer them on their way, the children jumping with joy at the most spectacular sight they've ever witnessed.
A beam of electric light pierces the darkness over the calm waters of the Atlantic Ocean. The Titanic is quietly making its way through the waves, its passengers asleep, when suddenly a monstrous white shape is caught in the light beam. The fateful iceberg is about to rend the side of the legendary ship. April 14, 1912, only 2 days before someone will take a photo of a giant iceberg with a pretty unusual elliptical shape. It turns out that this iceberg most likely formed out of snow that fell 100,000 years ago. Researchers used computer modeling to figure out its origin. They used data from 1912 and added some new information about winds and ocean currents. They concluded that the iceberg was probably a part of a small cluster of glaciers in southwest Greenland. These days, it's possible to calculate the routes of such icebergs in any given year in the past. So the infamous chunk of ice was on its way from Greenland to an area further south from Cornwall. If the ship had passed through that region only 2 days later, the iceberg would have moved far away from the point where they met. At first, the weight of the most well-known iceberg in the world was 75 million tons. With time, it started to slowly melt away. And when it sank the Titanic, its weight was only 1.5 million tons. By the time of the collision, it had probably been melting for months, but it was still a true monster. When the Titanic sank, the iceberg was 400 feet long, and more than 100 feet of its surface was above the water. Some people believe it was a supermoon that caused the Titanic to sink. That night, there was a rare lunar event. It hadn't happened for 1,400 years. In normal conditions, the iceberg wouldn't have traveled so far south without melting and losing the largest part of its mass. But the supermoon could have been the reason for an unusually high tide that pulled the iceberg away from the glacier way faster than usual. There's a specific type of bacteria that slowly consumes the remains of the Titanic. Salt corrosion, ocean currents, freezing temperatures, plus this rust-eating microorganism might consume the entire wreckage. American actress Dorothy Gibson was aboard the Titanic. She survived, and when she arrived in New York, she started filming a movie called Saved from the Titanic almost right away. The movie was released only a month after the Titanic sank, and in the movie, she even wore the same shoes and clothes she had during the actual disaster. The movie was a big success at that time, but the only known copy was destroyed in a fire. 14 years before the Titanic sank, a novella called Futility had been published, and it seemed to have predicted the whole event. The plot centered around a fictional ship called the Titan that sank during its voyage. The Titan was almost the same size as Titanic, and they both went to the bottom in April. The reason was hitting an iceberg, too. Both the real and fictional ships were described as unsinkable, and both of them had the legally required number of lifeboats, which, as it turned out later, were nowhere near enough. We've seen it in the movie, but there were some real-life love stories happening on the Titanic, too. 13 couples even took a trip on the Titanic as part of their honeymoon. One of the couples owned Macy's department store in New York. Once it became clear the Titanic was rapidly sinking, the woman refused to go into a lifeboat without her husband. But he didn't want to join her while there were still women and children who he thought had to go first. Then his wife gave her coat to her maid. She insisted that the maid should get into the lifeboat, and she wanted her to be warm. As for the woman herself, she decided to stay with her husband till the end. Some people believe Titanic sank because of a mummy, not an iceberg. It all started around 1000 BCE with a mysterious woman who lived in Egypt, in the City of Thieves. People knew little about her, but they called her a priestess. Her mummy was put in a wooden sarcophagus and covered with a large lid with the image of her face and some mystical inscriptions. This place had been hidden until the first half of the 19th century, when a group of locals accidentally came across it. They disturbed her peace. No one knows how, but the mummy disappeared that day without a trace. A couple of decades later, a group of rich friends from England traveled to Egypt and found the empty mummy casket with the image of the priestess, whose dark eyes seemed to be looking into the void. They decided to buy it, but the buyer disappeared the same night before he even got the case. All members of the group had some accidents. The casket changed its location a couple of times until it, as some believe, ended up on the Titanic. It took more than 70 years for a robot submarine to find the ruins of this legendary ship. The wreck lies nearly 13,000 feet under the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, split into two halves. Why did the liner break apart? No one knows exactly. Some think it happened because of the water that got inside when the ship collided with the iceberg. The pressure was so powerful it separated two parts of the vessel, starting with the ship's bottom structure. Others say it was because of the hull rivets. They had a high concentration of slag or smelting residue, and that's something that can cause the metal to split apart. The ship generally had many flaws, starting with the design. The watertight bulkheads weren't completely sealed on top. This allowed the water to flow between the compartments and, in the end, sink the vessel. The iron of the ship's rivets and steel of the hull ended up ruined because of high sulfur content, cold temperatures, and high speeds. The steel shattered and the rivets popped out quite easily. Because of this, Titanic sank 24 times faster than it would have otherwise. If the ship had hit the iceberg head-on instead of ramming it with its side, it would have probably stayed afloat. How come the crew members didn't have binoculars? It would have surely helped them spot the iceberg on time and maybe even avoid the disaster. But the binoculars on the Titanic were locked in a storage cabinet. Only one crew member had the key, and he had been transferred off the ship right before it set sail. He later said he hadn't remembered to hand over the key. But even without the binoculars, the ship might have had some time to change course and avoid the collision if the crew had gotten some warning. But that's the thing, someone did warn them. About an hour before the incident, a ship that was relatively close to Titanic, the SS Californian, sent a message to inform them it had stopped because of dense ice field. But the warning never got to the Titanic's captain. Some experts say it was because the radio operator didn't think it was that urgent. And later, the SS Californian said they didn't get a call for help from the Titanic because their radio operator was off duty. Some say the crew on the Titanic couldn't spot the iceberg on time because of an optical illusion. Atmospheric conditions that night probably caused super refraction, which could have camouflaged the berg. After all, no one actually saw the iceberg until it was too close to the ship to somehow avoid the crash. Not even a whole minute passed between the moment they saw the iceberg and the collision. It was only 37 seconds, and it took Titanic 2 hours and 40 minutes to disappear below the ocean's waves.
There's not much to do in Antarctica except scientific work. You could check out the wildlife, like some cute penguins and seals, and you'd get to see the occasional whale swimming around. Antarctica is one of the biggest lands out there that's only inhabited by scientists and researchers from all over the world. These scientists dug a hole through some pretty thick ice to study the ancient air and how the atmosphere cleans itself. They used a special drill and dug a clean cylindrical hole 450 feet below the surface. Some of this ice can be up to 800,000 years old and is a good indicator of what the climate was like in the past. It's like checking out tree rings to determine how old a certain tree is, except it's more complicated than that. After the effortless digging, they decided to drop some ice to the bottom of the hole to see what would happen next. They heard some really unusual sounds. It felt like being on a spaceship traveling through a bunch of obstacles with many rocks smashing into each other. The pitches changed over the quick descent of the block of ice, ranging from high pitch and ending with a low heartbeat-like sound. The scientists were puzzled when they first heard this and dropped some more ice, only to find out that the same type of sounds were being produced, just in different variations. They couldn't tell what was down there, and, more importantly, why these kinds of sounds were produced. Antarctica boasts quite a few volcanoes, many of which are under super thick sheets of ice. Scientists discovered 91 volcanoes and claimed there could be more, potentially making it the most extensive volcanic region in the world. While they were doing regular scientific research, they came across many unmistakable large cone-shaped figures underground. Some were as deep as 2 miles in the ice. Some of the peaks were over 3,000 feet tall and dozens of miles across. But on the surface, it's as plain as a sheet of paper. They may have dropped that block of ice inside an actual volcano that they were standing on, but it's unlikely. Even though the underground volcano presence was discovered by accident, there's a small chance they were actually standing on one where they had their workstation set up. It's more likely that they worked in an area where studying ancient climates is easier and less dangerous than other places. They collect ice samples and study them in a lab. It's like discovering a prehistoric insect embedded in amber millions of years ago when dinosaurs used to roam the land. But instead of little bugs, scientists study ancient dust, air bubbles, sea salts, volcanic ash, and anything else that may have come from the environment. They can practically tell how the climate was during that time. These ice samples might show that Antarctica's western ice sheet melted when the Earth's climate warmed up. If it did, then it's likely to happen again. That would mean sea levels rising, affecting coastal cities and small remote islands. But scientists aren't sure it's true, despite some evidence to back it up. The process of studying ice samples can take a week or even a year, depending on what they find. They crush or melt the sample bit by bit. And like those tree rings, the deeper the layer, the further we go back in time. In order to study ancient bubbles trapped in ice, researchers have to crush the samples under a vacuum hood to keep the air out while extracting the air and putting it in vials. There are various instruments and devices to study the ice samples, but because it's so sensitive to damage, each measurement must be in a clean room setting so that nothing gets compromised. The scientists have to wear proper bodysuits and many layers of gloves and constantly get ventilated. Even something as tiny and insignificant as a fingerprint can ruin a sample. They look for certain patterns to see changes in the atmosphere's composition and temperature. But dropping a few blocks of ice down a hole wouldn't be so bad. The reason why it made such a peculiar sound is the same reason why a moving car sounds different when it's honking than when it's stationary. The scientific word for it is the Doppler effect. It's an obvious change in the frequency of a wave with respect to an observer who is moving relative to the wave source. The effect doesn't mean the frequency of the sound changes, it just shifts. And this can be said about other types of waves, like water and light. But sound waves are the most popular ones when it comes to the Doppler effect. So, when the scientists dropped the ice block down the bottom of the hole, the sound waves traveled back up and bounced around the narrow tube where they drilled. That's why they got the pew pew sound. Let's not forget that this ice block traveled 450 feet beneath us. Oil ships dig holes in the oceanic crust that go thousands of feet beneath the Earth. The Kola Super Deep Borehole in Russia is the deepest hole ever made by humans. It goes more than 40,000 feet below the surface and took almost 20 years to reach 7.5 miles. Below it is only half the distance to the mantle. In terms of the whole Earth, this very deep hole is literally scratching the surface. This wasn't a hole to dig for oil, and wasn't in the ocean either. The drilling was stopped in 1992 when the engineers found out that the temperatures were 100 degrees Fahrenheit higher than they predicted. And then it was abandoned, and it's just been a barren hole now. But that's the closest we've dug to the center of the planet. The scary thing is that some of the workers on the site could hear voices coming from within. All the way in Yemen, an ancient hole exists in Barhout, in the east of the country in the middle of the desert. It's actually closer to Oman than to the capital Sana'a. This hole has puzzled experts and locals. Unlike the holes in Russia and Antarctica, this wasn't man-made. Or was it? It's been around for many years, and the locals try to steer away from it. They don't even like talking about it, since they claim it brings bad luck to those around it, or to whoever utters its name. They claim it was created as a prison for spirits, but many rule that out. The hole is 98 feet wide and somewhere between 330 to 650 feet deep. You can also hear strange sounds coming from the inside. But according to some scientists, the well has little to no ventilation and barely has any oxygen down there. So it's unlikely that anyone or anything lives down there. The Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench caught some low-pitched grumble sounds in March of 2016. Some of these grumbles were followed by screeches. They caught these sounds in a span of weeks, using a titanium-encased microphone so that the immense pressure of the lowest point on Earth wouldn't crush it. They had to lower it slowly as well, since it's 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. For 23 whole days, the microphone recorded typical sounds of whales passing by and boats sailing across from above, and even rumbles of nearby earthquakes, but they still couldn't determine what caused those initial sounds. The researchers couldn't understand if the noise from the bottom of the Mariana Trench was caused by humans or was natural. They also wanted to know if these sounds affected marine life, like dolphins and whales that rely on echolocation. They still can't figure it out, but scientists estimate that the ocean is about 10 times noisier than it was 50 years ago. With technological developments in shipping, submarines, and underwater construction, the ocean will only get louder with time. Northern lights come with sounds, which nobody talks about. They're usually audible when the auroras are at their most powerful presence. Scientists were always puzzled as to what caused the faint popping and crackling, even though they were very far above us. They used some special microphones and found out that the sounds came just 230 feet above us, which is pretty low. They're caused by electrical charges gaining power in a specific region of the auroras. The electrical charges are disturbed by magnetic storms that fire up the northern lights. As a result, some tiny sparks are released into the atmosphere, causing the faint crackling and popping noise.
This sleek, state-of-the-art submarine named Ran was sent to explore the depths of Antarctica. But as soon as it discovered something, it mysteriously disappeared. So, what happened? It all started when scientists wanted to explore one of the most remote and mysterious places on Earth, the Dotson Ice Shelf in West Antarctica. This ice shelf, silent giant, stretches 30 miles wide. That's almost the length of New York City. It stands between two icy promontories, the Martin and Bear Peninsulas, and it hides an entire world of geological mysteries. If you think that Antarctica is nothing but a desert of super thick snow and ice, you're wrong. There are entire landscapes hidden deep down there. The underside of the Dotson Ice Shelf is a rugged, dynamic terrain shaped by the slow, relentless forces of nature. There are towering ice formations, deep troughs, and bizarre structures stretching for hundreds of feet. Scientists are super curious about it, but as you can imagine, this landscape isn't easy to explore at all. To find out more, we have to scan the area with satellites or try drilling through the snow, trying to collect the big picture, piece by piece. But these methods only gave us vague hints. The real breakthrough happened when scientists came up with the idea to let the submarines explore it. Autonomous submersibles could swoop deep into the icy waters beneath the Dotson Ice Shelf and tell us what's up down there. These robotic explorers have fantastic advanced sonar systems. It's that thing that bats or dolphins do. They can use sound to see the world. Basically, they send out sound waves underwater, and when those waves hit something like the ice shelf above or the seafloor below, they bounce back to the system. Animals feel how long it took for the sound waves to return and how they changed. And this helped them understand what's located where. For example, clicks that dolphins send out tell them where the fish are. We copied this crazy evolutionary trick and adapted it to our underwater exploration. Only our version is much cooler, with a higher level of precision, so we created detailed maps of the environment. The Ran submarine was one of those robotic explorers. It was named after the Norse deity of the sea. Ran had been meticulously programmed to navigate a treacherous landscape of Antarctica. But even with all this training, its journey led to an unexpected and eerie end. In 2019, Ran was sent to explore the depths beneath the Dotson Ice Shelf. It was a hero, the first one to go on a mission like this. The team said it was like seeing the other side of the moon. For 27 straight days, it worked tirelessly. It traveled over 620 miles beneath the thick ice. That's like a journey from Paris to Berlin. Ran went further and deeper than anyone could have imagined. At one point, it reached over 10 miles into the glacier's belly, and what it discovered down there was astonishing. Scientists thought there would be some smooth, uniform ice surfaces, but Ran revealed an underside marked by huge cracks, ridges. There were formations that looked like sand dunes, frozen in time. And finally, it found some mysterious swirling and teardrop-shaped patterns. They all looked more like art than geology. This actually tells the story of ice shelves and the ocean around it. Warm water sneaks in under the ice and melts it from below. Sometimes it smooths the ice out, but other times it carves out these weird, uneven shapes that look like patterns and drawings. And some of these shapes are huge, over 1,300 feet long. That's about 3.5 football fields. The reason why they look like swirling doodles is because the Earth spins. It makes the water turn in special ways, bending the shapes and drawing these spirals. It's called the Coriolis effect. Imagine you were on a merry-go-round and tried to throw something like a ball. It would go in a curve, not a straight line. Same thing happens with the water on Earth. Later, scientists found similar patterns in other Antarctic ice shelves, though they weren't as epic as the ones under Dodson. But Ran also discovered something horrifying. Turns out that these warm waters, aside from being great artists, are also a huge danger. The Dodson ice shelf isn't just hanging out serenely on the sea. It's part of a very delicate system and acts as a protective barrier that holds back huge glaciers in West Antarctica. The ice shelf is floating on the ocean, but it's still connected to the land. As warm water sneaks underneath it and the ice melts, the Dodson can't hold on to the land as tightly anymore. The protective barrier starts to weaken, and this lets the glaciers behind it move faster into the ocean. When those glaciers flow into the sea, they add more water, which could cause sea levels to rise, eventually changing our coastlines. Rand stumbled upon huge pockets where the ice was melting at alarming rates, all due to powerful underwater currents. It was like seeing a ticking clock on the glacier. The stakes were high, but luckily the submarine was ready. This time, it managed to return. And then, it worked for 5 more years, helping scientists with tons of useful data. The missions were daunting. There could be periods where Rand slipped into the pitch-black cavity beneath the glaciers, spending 24 hours without communication. But it was mapping every peak and every valley. It gained experience from over 40 missions below ice. Then, in early 2024, Rand went on a mission to the Thwaites Glacier. The mission was bold from the start. This place is also ominously referred to as the Doomsday Glacier. It's called that because it's slowly melting and has the potential to raise sea levels worldwide if it collapses, causing catastrophes everywhere. That's why Rand was dispatched to explore its underbelly, a place that had never been mapped so intricately before. The idea was to uncover the glacier's secrets, study how rapidly it was melting, and why. This was Rand's second time exploring Thwaites. During the previous visit, it became the first sub to ever map the glacier's underside. Rand was exploring the depths from 650 feet to 1,650 feet. It sent a lot of data about how the Doomsday Glacier was slowly melting due to warm ocean currents. But while venturing into these icy depths, something went wrong. Out of nowhere, Rand vanished. Without warning, without a trace. One moment it was sending back crucial data, and the next, it had slipped into the abyss. No distress signals, no final transmission, and it didn't return to the point it was supposed to. People sent extensive searches, helicopters soared overhead, drones buzzed through the frozen skies, but no sign of the submersible emerged from the glacier's grasp. After a while, Rand's batteries would certainly run away. So at this point, it had definitely been swallowed by the abyss beneath 1,500 feet of ice. That was a huge and sad loss for the scientific team. The scientists at the University of Gothenburg are now looking to replace Rand and continue their important research under Thwaites. To this day, scientists have no idea what happened to it. Some say it may have been trapped in the ice. Others believe it was pulled away by an unseen current. It also might have collided with something unexpected. Whatever the truth is, its disappearance has left scientists stunned, and it looks like the ice shelf will hold on to its secrets a little longer. At least we gained a treasure trove of knowledge from Rand's journey. Scientists keep exploring Antarctica, looking for history that hides under the snow. For example, they discovered that around 90 million years ago, a lush temperate rainforest thrived near the South Pole. They revealed an ancient world far warmer than they ever imagined. Deep in Antarctica, they unearthed fossilized roots, pollen, and spores preserved in the soil. All this shows that there was a swampy rainforest that flourished despite months of polar darkness. All these discoveries changed our understanding of Earth's climate, both in the past and the future.
Over millions of years, our planet has changed a lot. Ice ages, shifting tectonic plates, global floods, meteorites. Whole species of animals have come and gone over millennia. At some point in all of this, we humans came along. Now imagine a place that was cut off from the rest of the world for 5.5 million years, possibly much more. A place that no human had ever set foot in before. In 1986, we finally found it, Movila Cave. You head to the airport and buy a ticket to Romania. Next, you rent a car and drive southeast. You're looking for Constanța County, right near the Black Sea. Your phone says you're there, so you stop the car and look around. You're in the middle of a deserted field, nothing but a wide, lifeless plain. Then, you see it. A hole in the ground. As you move closer, you realize it's a shaft that leads deep down into the Earth's crust. Before you descend into the darkness, you take a rope, a hard hat, a powerful flashlight, and an oxygen tank. Don't forget to wear your protective suit and oxygen mask. You climb down slowly and look around. It's pitch dark below you, and you feel a little uneasy. But something's off. The darkness. It's not cold. Warm air wafts up from the depths. Finally, you feel the ground under your feet. You look around and see a lot of tunnels ahead that lead into the depths of the cave. The tunnels are covered with dry clay. Moving forward on all fours, you notice something. The air is getting warmer and wetter. You come out of a narrow tunnel and find yourself in a huge cave with a lake in the center. Now for the hard part, you have to dive in. The moment you get in the water, you get attacked by the smell of rotten eggs. You've just touched sulfide water, and now smelly hydrogen sulfide is everywhere. That's not all. The cave is also filled with carbon dioxide. Normal fresh air on the surface is about 20% oxygen, but here it's only 10%. Not enough for us to survive without our trusty oxygen tank. Still, all those other gases give you a nasty headache. You turn on your flashlight to full power and dive under. Somehow, you need to swim through these narrow underwater rifts. There are a lot of them. It looks like an underwater maze. You're a little worried, but your O2 tank is still pretty full. You squeeze through the rifts and finally find an open area. You freeze. From above, below, from all sides, you start to hear the sound of crawling creatures. The flashlight beam catches thousands of slippery, fast insects. This cave contains 48 species, 33 of which are completely new to us. Strange white snails crawl along the walls, and transparent shrimps, even small leeches, swim in the water. White centipedes with huge whiskers and transparent spiders shuffle around under your feet. There are even 2 species of scorpion, as if you weren't scared enough. Water scorpions, and another kind, as yet unidentified. It's not exactly your typical desert scorpion. Actually, nothing around here looks normal. All the creatures here are white or transparent. They don't have eyes, just long legs and whisker antennas that help them navigate in the watery darkness. It's a sci-fi director's paradise. You couldn't make this stuff up. The deeper you go into the cave, the less oxygen there is. Amazingly, there are even more small monsters running around. The air is all methane and carbon dioxide. These bizarre little things have never seen the sun, never been out of this cave. The spiders, scorpions, and leeches get hungry, right? They feed on smaller creatures, snails and worms. But what do the smallest creatures eat? Just then, you notice something very strange on the surface of the water. There's a gross white substance that looks like foam. You touch it carefully. It's like wet toilet paper, and it tears as soon as you touch it. But it's not foam or paper. It's billions of living organisms, bacteria, called autotrophs. These bacteria make food from carbon dioxide, but they don't make it from the air like plants or trees. They use water. It's called chemosynthesis. These tiny bacteria excrete their unused food, and bigger ones come along and eat it. Then the tiny snails and worms eat the big bacteria. A whole wacky, unique food cycle deep underground in a random cave in Romania. That's why you need that protective suit and mask. It's not just for your comfort and safety. Without the suit, you might accidentally leave behind some human bacteria from your skin or something. It could ruin the delicate balance of life in this underwater world. The underwater cave is too small and dangerous for expensive scientific equipment, so you grab a couple of samples of water, land, and air and get out of there as fast as possible. The cave hasn't been fully explored yet. The Romanian authorities don't allow just anyone to scuba dive on down there. Let's see in a few years. Who knows what else they'll find? You're back at your fancy lab, and you start to understand why that cave is such a big deal. The conditions in Mobile are almost the same as in the first years of Earth's existence. Back then, our world was shielded from the sun by a dense atmosphere. It's actually possible that the microbes found in the cave are the same ones that were around way back when life began. These bacteria could turn out to be incredibly useful. They oxidize the dangerous gases, methane, and carbon dioxide. Basically, they make them harmless. Thanks, little guys. Mobile Cave isn't the only extreme place on Earth where life still finds a way to survive and thrive. Picture the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Now imagine 10 of them on top of each other. Now imagine drilling down that deep. Got it? Life still goes on, even this far down. There's almost no oxygen there. The pressure is insanely high, and it's hotter than the hottest desert. Welcome to the nematode empire. Nematodes are worms, and these wiggly dudes are tough as nails. When there's no air, no food, or it's just too hot, they transform. It's called the Dower stage. It's a state of stasis, of deep hibernation. The worm's metabolism slows way down. It's like they go to sleep for a long time and only wake up when there's enough air or food around, or when it gets cool enough. And you don't have to dig that deep to find these creatures. Nematodes are found all over the world. They live in hot springs, in deserts, high up in the mountains, in the harsh cold of Antarctica, inside animals, and even inside the human body. You don't have to travel to Mars to find out of this world scenery. There are places on Earth that look unreal. The Danakil Depression in Ethiopia is one of the hottest, driest, and most inaccessible places anywhere on Earth. It's a large desert that gets almost no rain, but there's still plenty of liquid around. It sits on 2 active volcanoes, so liquid hot magma often flows up from under the Earth's crust. There are also colorful lakes full of acidic water. The salt from the lakes reacts with volcanic minerals, making bizarre figures that look like the backdrop of a sci-fi movie. Toxic gases and chlorine vapors rise up from the lakes, making it one of the most dangerous places on Earth. You need a gas mask to survive, but life always finds a way. There are living things here, even in a lake so hot that the acidic water actually boils. Microbes live happily in the lakes and surrounding rocks. If something can survive here, who knows? You can find another tough survivor in the Lut Desert in Iran. They've just discovered a new and special kind of crustacean there. These creatures live in small lakes that appear from time to time thanks to desert rains. This species can survive for decades in dry sediments, just waiting for a tiny bit of water. So these are all very small life forms, but are you in the mood for some monsters? Scientists have just discovered them swimming in the waters off Antarctica. Massive sea spiders, huge starfish, transparent shrimp-like things. In 1 month, researchers found about 30,000 sea creatures, many of them never seen before. Who knows what else is down there?
Look at those lush coniferous forests and tundra. What a wonderland. You may have mistakenly thought it's Canada, but it's not. It's Antarctica, about 34 million years ago. So what makes Antarctica this frigid today? It turns out a mix of dropping carbon dioxide levels and some tectonic shuffle played a huge role in transforming this ice-free paradise into the frozen continent we know now. About 50 million years ago, CO2 concentrations were sky high, strutting around at around 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million. But as those levels tumbled down, global temps started to drop, paving the way for the mighty ice sheets that later took over Antarctica. While the CO2 dive was happening, tectonic activity was also working its magic. The big split between South America and Antarctica opened up the Drake Passage, which created the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. This powerful current acted like a bouncer, keeping warm air and ocean currents from crashing the Antarctic party, and helping keep things rather frosty. If you mix up Australia and Antarctica, you're not that wrong. These two continents used to be one. If you mix up Austria and Australia, it's much worse. By the way, don't fall for the internet myths and memes. There's no help desk in Austria specifically for people who intended to fly to Australia. Now, look at this magnificent Australian pink beach. It's precious, and not in a figurative sense. Those mysterious pinkish sands are actually garnet, and it's widely used in jewelry. Geologists studied those sands and came to the conclusion that the garnet contained there is older than local mountains. That doesn't make sense, right? In fact, it does. You see, Australia didn't used to be this very detached continent as it is now. Many millions of years ago, Australia and Antarctica were part of the supercontinent Gondwana, and glacial erosion released the garnet, which eventually made its way to the beach. These sands formed when South Australia was flat and chill, long before the mountains appeared. Most garnet gets washed away, but this batch has a rich history, tracing back to glacial rocks in the Transantarctic Mountains. So this pink sand comes from an ancient mountain range hidden under Antarctic ice. Not only does Antarctica ice hide gems like garnet, if you look harder, you might find entire buildings. Sounds insane, but this is exactly what a British explorer did. His name is Chris Brown, and he uncovered an entire building beneath the ice. He was traveling to the pole of inaccessibility, and it all started with a bummer. Chris and his son had their plane broken. Suddenly, they spotted a lone bust peeking out of the snow. This place was an old meteorological station. Despite freezing conditions, Chris and his son Micah had a blast exploring. Chris is on a mission to conquer all 7 earthbound poles of inaccessibility and has tackled 5 so far. I guess you already know that Antarctica is the largest desert on Earth, much larger than the Sahara or the Gobi. Still, despite being the driest continent on Earth, it boasts a seriously weird waterfall. Nestled in the mesmerizing McMurdo Dry Valleys, it's 5 stories tall and looks like it's gushing blood. It's even called Blood Falls. It may look outlandish and even frightening, but its nature can be easily explained. The water that creates this crimson cascade was once a salty lake, but over time, it became sealed off from the outside world when glaciers formed on top of it. Now, this ancient water hanging out 1,300 feet below the surface has cranked up its salt levels to 3 times saltier than the ocean. This salt water is also loaded with iron and gets 0 oxygen or sunlight. When the iron-rich water trickles through a crack in the glacier and meets the air, it rusts up, turning dark red. You may have mistakenly heard that no bug species belongs to Antarctica, but it's not exactly true, because there's this tiny Antarctic midge living there. Plus, there are some spiders too. Those aren't your average spiders hanging out in the darkest corners of your apartment. Those are critters lurking in the chilly darkness of the Antarctic ocean floor. These little marine creepers are actually arthropods and can stretch around 20 inches across. As if that wasn't bizarre enough, they also breathe through little holes in their legs. Quick question. What's the color that you associate most with Antarctica? I'm sure it's white. That's my association too. However, Antarctica may look like a slice of watermelon. That colorful snow comes courtesy of a tough little algae called Chlamydomonas nivalis. When things start to warm up during the Antarctic summer, these little guys release their vibrant red and green spores, painting the snow in wild and funky colors. But it's best to steer clear because that snow is not just a pretty sight. It's also toxic and definitely not edible. Searching for fossils is always a blast, but when you're in one of the most remote spots on the planet, it gets even more exciting. A diverse team of scientists recently hit the mother lode, pulling in over a ton of fossils from ancient marine life, dinosaurs, and birds from the late Cretaceous period, about 71 million years ago. Their adventure kicked off with a flight to South America, followed by a 5-day trek through the infamous Drake Passage. Upon reaching Antarctica, they set up camp using helicopters and inflatable boats. You might be thinking, why dig in Antarctica with all that ice? Well, it turns out there are places where rocks pop up, depending on the season. The team went to James Ross Island, located in the Antarctic Peninsula, and they went there during February and March. And that's one of the few parts of Antarctica where in summer, rocks are exposed, and those rocks can come from the age of dinosaurs. The expedition was a success, as they discovered over a ton of remarkable finds. Next up, the fossils will head to Chile before making their way to Pittsburgh's Carnegie Museum of Natural History. Among their discoveries, they found relics dating back about 71 million years, alongside some around 67 million years old, including plenty of snails, clams, and various marine creatures. Yikes! Look at this creepy sea worm. It could live in LA and be a star in a horror movie, but it chooses to call the chilly waters of the Southern Ocean near Antarctica its home. These worms can grow up to 8 inches long and 4 inches wide, but don't let their spooky exterior trick you. Research suggests they might actually be superheroes in disguise, playing a vital role in keeping ecosystems buzzing. Now, see that head? It's not really a head, it's just a retractable throat that helps this toothy creature chow down on its meals. Antarctica has many creepy critters to offer. Let me introduce you to the Antarctic strawberry feather star. It's not like Patrick from SpongeBob though. It's more like a deep-sea creature straight out of a horror movie. Picture this, 20 wiggly arms, some stretching up to 8 inches, all decked out with these bizarre little bumps. Yikes indeed. Back in 2014, scientists buried 34 seismic monitors in the snow on the Ross Ice Shelf, which is huge. Think of it as an ice slab the size of Texas, just chilling over the Southern Ocean. These clever little machines picked up a nearly non-stop buzzing. Even though our human ears usually can't catch these low-frequency sounds, scientists have worked their magic and made them audible for us. They even shared the creepy audio online. A glaciologist from the University of Chicago says that if you could hear this vibration, it'd sound like a swarm of cicadas taking over the backyard in late summer. But these glacier explorers weren't trying to capture spooky tunes. They're actually on a mission to monitor the Ross Ice Shelf because things are heating up, literally, and the ice is melting faster than ice cream on a hot day. Ice shelves are like Earth's safety plugs, keeping all that massive ice from surging into the ocean. So what exactly is making all that noise? It's likely just strong winds whipping across ice dunes, creating a kind of natural vibration. Discovering hidden places on our planet is extremely exciting. Today, I'm taking you on a trip that you aren't going to forget anytime soon. But suit up, this is about to get very cold. You hop on a plane and land on the ice-covered island of Greenland. An unbelievable view of the Aurora Borealis, aka the Northern Lights, is greeting you. You can't believe your eyes. Your guide tells you how rare this phenomenon is. Usually, people spend days trying to hunt it down. You feel lucky and take your time to appreciate these beautiful dancing greenish lights. You're glad you brought your camera along, aren't you? Between clicks, you learn that the Aurora Borealis is the result of some rather rough events. This spectacular light show occurs when energy particles from the sun slam into Earth's upper atmosphere. On day 2, you continue to explore the place by air. This may not come as a surprise, but Greenland is one of the world's largest islands. This time, on board a helicopter, you can see the infinite icy landscape. In case you're curious, you're now flying over 656,000 square miles of thick ice. Oh, what's that down there? It looks like a family of polar bears. You don't want to get too close, of course. The conditions in Greenland might be too tough for people to live there, but some animal species do very well in this land of ice. Those are reindeer, wolves, and Arctic foxes. On your way to Greenland, you probably made a pit stop in Copenhagen. Denmark is one of the few countries that have commercial flights to Greenland. You didn't know this before, but you find out that the island is actually part of the Kingdom of Denmark. On a map, it's right between the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans. You're lucky to have a local pilot that tells you about the secrets hidden in this scenery. Under this 2-mile thick white surface, there's an entirely different world. A world filled with canyons, meteor-carved craters, and millennia-old plant fossils. You are beyond excited to go visit one of these spots, but of course, you'll have to use your imagination, as all of it is hidden under ice. Believe it or not, nearly 80% of the island's surface is covered with it. The first stop on your tour is Greenland's Grand Canyon. You land not far from it, somewhere in the northern part of the island. You may know that canyons are deep, narrow valleys with steep sides, but I bet you didn't know that the word canyon actually comes from the Spanish word cañón, which means tube or pipe. Now, this Grand Canyon has some similarities with the one in the US. First of all, in size. It's at least 460 miles long and up to 2,600 feet deep in some places. There's a true subglacial valley down there, and if you're wondering how this happened, well, the canyon had probably been formed by a river that had been flowing through Greenland before the ice took over. Oh yeah, Greenland hasn't always been covered with ice. It was once green, no pun intended. Many other icy places on Earth, such as Antarctica, were once covered in greenery. Scientists have figured out that in the past, Greenland was mostly ice-free. With the help of airborne radar, they made amazing discoveries. By the way, ice is invisible to radar technology. If you have trouble believing it, try putting an ice cube inside your microwave. It won't melt or heat up. A recent discovery of fossilized plants allowed researchers to estimate that Greenland used to be much warmer than they could imagine. 2021 research conducted by the University of Vermont found fossils of twigs and leaves, which left researchers very confused. They expected to discover sand and rocks in the deepest layer of ice, but instead, they found some clear proof of rich flora. Judging by what you've seen of the landscape, it's hard to believe that forests were once growing here. Today, you'll find some tundra vegetation on the coastal part of the island, and that's pretty much it. But according to the genetic material found in these fossilized plants, researchers believe the island used to be much greener. It's very likely that there were insect-filled forests with butterflies and beetles flying around, and the average temperature on the island varied from 50 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer to 1 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter. NASA's Operation Ice Bridge has flown over Greenland more than 100 times. This has allowed researchers to create 3D maps of the island and figure out the age of each layer of ice in Greenland's ice sheet. Ice sheets can help answer many scientific questions as they form over the span of thousands of years. They're layers of snow on top of more snow. The snow gets compacted into ice, which in turn creates what we call an ice sheet. Remember those fossils we were talking about? They're believed to be from the Eemian period, which was 130,000 to 115,000 years ago. According to the groundbreaking 3D footage from NASA, we can see 3 distinct climate periods within the ice sheet. The uppermost layer is quite flat and uniform. If you decided to dig deeper, you'd find the layer formed during the last ice age. It's more complex and rugged. The ice there is darker than what you see on the surface. If you let your mind wander, you can picture what this part of the world looked like when mammoths were roaming around. If you kept digging, you'd eventually find leftover ice from the Eemian period I've told you about. Now, canyons aren't the only unusual thing found under ice. If you could sneak a peek under all those layers of snow, you'd see an impressive mountain range, and also plunging fjords. In 2017, scientists created a map that showed what Greenland had looked like without all that ice. There was a bowl-like depression in the middle of the enormous island. This depression was most likely an ancient lake. Around it, there was a circle of coastal mountain ranges. This scenery probably resembled the landscapes of modern Patagonia. Big mountains with snowy tops surrounding crystalline lakes. This ancient lake in Greenland is a wonder on its own. Imagine a pit the size of Rhode Island and Delaware put together. The lake is believed to have covered over 2,700 square miles, and back in the day, it was fed by at least 18 different streams. These crystalline blue waters were surely very inviting, and freezing of course. But if you ended up going for a swim, I'd say be careful, as the water could get up to 800 feet deep in some places. On day 3 of your adventure, you discover a true under-ice water park. While you're wandering around the ice-covered island, your guide tells you to be mindful of the cracks in the surface. These cracks are responsible for the modern-day aqua lounge going on down there. Meltwater and rainwater flow down the cracks in the ice all the way down to the riverbeds. This forms a landscape of jewel-like lakes and streams filled with crystalline water. Researchers estimate that about 60 small under-ice lakes exist there. And yes, they're actual lakes. Perhaps one of the most impressive hidden features on this island is a meteor crater. Under the Hiawatha Glacier, you can find a 19-mile-wide impact crater, big enough to swallow the city of Washington. Apparently, a mile-wide iron asteroid struck Earth's atmosphere within the past 100,000 years and chose Greenland as its landing point. If anyone had been around to see it, they'd have witnessed a real show, a white glowing fireball cutting through the sky. Scientists speculate that if it had landed on an ice sheet, it certainly vaporized both water and stone. Someone standing hundreds of miles from the impact site would have heard a deafening thunderclap and experienced hurricane-force winds. But it actually makes sense. The approximate speed of meteors entering Earth's atmosphere is 45,000 miles per hour. For comparison, that is 2.5 times the speed of a spaceship. It's bound to make some noise and leave a huge crater in the ground.
The Javari Valley in Brazil is an untouched jungled area of 33,000 square miles, slightly larger than Austria. This place is protected to stop outsiders from entering. This isolated area is home to one of Brazil's largest indigenous territories. Here, uncontacted tribes with no understanding of the outside world can live peacefully in the jungle. Observation is only made by officials from the air. It provides a small glimpse and a better understanding of how early hunter-gatherer societies once lived. Up to 3,000 inhabitants within 14 different tribes live deep inside the reservation in up to 19 villages. This makes the Javari Valley one of the largest concentrations of isolated peoples in the world. It's illegal for outsiders to enter this area, as contact with outside humans would be volatile to the natives' health. These remote tribes haven't evolved an immunity to the many bacteria that we have, so it's crucial they are left alone. Within the Vatican, there is a massive secret storage room. It contains up to 52 miles of shelving for archives that date as far back as the 8th century. It contains many significant letters, books, and other documents from notable people collected by the Vatican. One letter from Abraham Lincoln here is from the 1860s, discussing the progress of the USA with the Papal States. Another is from Queen Mary of the Scots when she sought help from the Pope in 1587. And there are even documents regarding the trial of Galileo in the 17th century, as he questioned the true movements of the Earth moving around the Sun. There are 1,200 years of documentation regarding world events. However, most of it is secret, as access is only provided to academic researchers. And to be one of those, you will need to be the minimum age of 75 and must renew your request for access to the room every 6 months. And even then, while you poke through the secret documents, you are under constant supervision of the Swiss Guard. With so much secrecy, it would be interesting what else could be hidden in these confidential documents. Halfway between Hawaii and Australia lies the lonely Howland Island. It has a long history of being an isolated and unforgiving location. Since 1857, miners spent 2 decades extracting bird droppings that were centuries old, a valuable fertilizer at the time. The island was abandoned until 1935, when the USA attempted to make a colony there. They were excited to build its first airport. They expected it would one day be a great location for a stopover flight, creating an easier connection from Australia to California. A flight path had even been prepared on Howland Island for the arrival of Amelia Earhart. It was all set up as a landing point for her circumnavigational flight of the globe. Unfortunately, Amelia lost contact before making it to the isle. The dream of the airport to be used on the Trans-Pacific flight path was abandoned, and the colony soon dispersed with no further attempts to repopulate it. But the island is now a protected reservation for the fragile ecosystem that surrounds it. It's visited once every 2 years to assess the regeneration of wildlife, and no one is allowed to enter without official authorization. Heard Island is an offshore territory of Australia. 80% of it is covered in ice, and it has the country's only active volcanoes. It's also surrounded by glaciers, with the highest descending to sea level from 7,900 feet. If you're lucky enough to gain authorization to access the island, you can do this only by sailing 4,000 miles across rough seas. After you've successfully sailed the long voyage, you'll find yourself in this uninhabited 142 square mile territory. Congrats! You've made it to one of the most isolated places in the world. Only whalers and sealers sometimes lived here until the 1880s. And since these whalers left, only researchers have made the daring voyage. Since 2011, no one has returned. All the buildings have broken down over the years from the extreme weather, so it's not the best option for a vacation. With freezing temperatures and powerful winds that can reach 110 miles per hour, only the hardiest of plants and animals can survive this place. In France, there's a network of caves called the Lascaux Caves that provides artwork that is truly unique. Wall paintings that date back 17,000 years ago from the early Magdalenian age provide around 6,000 images. They decorate the walls, giving a great insight to what types of animals existed in that ancient period. Some of the animals portrayed have been extinct in France for thousands of years, like the ancient aurochs and rhinoceros. Painted in a mixture of red, yellow, and black colors, made from several different mineral pigments, the pictures depict what hunter-gathering societies hunted from the region. But the ingredients were vulnerable from tourists' visits, which were then stopped in 1963. The carbon dioxide from the visitors' breath and presence of light caused lichens, crystals, and molds to appear in the caves, which provided potential damage to the minerals of the paintings. These caves are now heavily restricted for entry, but replicas of the paintings have been made available to provide a similar experience. Canada is the second largest country in the world, although the northwestern part is mostly unpopulated. One island in this area, Devon Island, is the largest uninhabited island on the planet. It covers a massive area of 12,000 square miles, almost the same size as Croatia. People struggled to live in this desolate land. The Inuits tried for a while, but even they decided to give up on this unforgiving land in the 1930s. With low precipitation on the island, harsh winds, and freezing temperatures, it can only support microclimates of vegetation. Settlements were also abandoned in 1951, since they weren't economically viable with the limited resources Devon Island had to offer. However, today, due to its similarities with Mars, scientists make the difficult journey to research the island. The environment is very difficult to live in, with its poor terrain, freezing temperatures, and isolation. So, it's become a perfect match for NASA to test equipment and crew for future missions to Mars, the Moon, and even asteroids. Halfway between the North Pole and the northern coast of Norway sits the Svalbard Archipelago. This isolated island is covered by snowy tundra. It's virtually unlivable here. But as you make the long journey, trekking through the snow, you might be lucky to reach the Svalbard Vault, poking out of a mountain. After accessing its daunting entrance, you follow through a long tunnel deeper into the mountain. You can hear constant noises from the cooling system all around you. This is to make sure the temperature is at a cool negative 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit, perfect for the contents it's preserving. As you reach the end of the tunnel, you enter the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. This is basically a safety deposit box holding the world's largest collection of agricultural biodiversity. Since its opening in 2008, 13,000 years of agricultural history have been accumulated, with over 1 million separate distinct crop samples stored here. The purpose of the vault is to provide a backup against any accidental loss of crops throughout the world. The 148 countries who deposited into the vault can withdraw when they need to. However, it is heavily restricted, with only authorized personnel accessing the seeds within. In Brazil, there's an island just 21 miles from the coast. It's one of the most dangerous islands in the world. Filled with a lot of snakes, it's aptly named Snake Island. Golden lancehead snakes became marooned on this island when it separated from the mainland during the last ice age. From their isolation, they adapted to their surroundings, growing in numbers, and their venom becoming more potent with whatever prey they could find. Their venom is up to 5 times more powerful than their mainland cousins. And with the island the size of only 43 hectares, it's home to 4,000 venomous snakes. That's at least 1 snake per square foot. The island is restricted due to the highly venomous residents. Only officials and researchers observing the snakes are allowed access. But if you happen to be sailing by and your boat sinks, there's a number to call just in case. Just don't leave the beach.
So, there's a mysterious doorway in the middle of Antarctica. Some people think it's Bigfoot's vacation home, or a shuttlecraft from Star Trek, or maybe a door to Agartha, a mythical kingdom some people believe is located in the center of the Earth. Well, the scientists debunked all these poetic theories and explained that what looks like a mysterious doorway is located in an area of fast sea ice. It's offshore of the coast and is full of little islands with shallow water around them. When ice flows around hard rocks hidden underneath, it can create patterns that look odd but are totally normal. In this spot, the ice is thin, so the rocks underneath have a big effect on how the ice moves. The cold winds in Antarctica also shape the ice and snow and make it look like they're lines and shapes. So, the mysterious doorway is just a rocky ridge poking out because the ice has melted a little. The top of the doorway is the tip of the rock, and the sides are snowy trails left by strong winds blowing in the same direction. It's essentially an iceberg that got stranded and is melting in one place. One YouTuber found another out-of-place mysterious object more than 150 miles off the shore of Antarctica, a 400-foot-long ice ship. The internet went wild with theories like that the ship must have ended up there right from the Bermuda Triangle. But there was no scientific proof that it was a ship and not just a large chunk of ice. And once some other internet users revisited the place, they noticed the ice melted in the summer and the hypothetical ship was gone. Another mysterious Google Maps find in Antarctica was a pyramid. And before you make up an exciting theory about how the ancient Egyptians built a secret base here, I have to tell you it turned out to be just a mountain. It's part of the tallest mountain range in Antarctica that stretches for almost 250 miles. It's not the first pyramid on this continent, as explorers from the British Antarctic Expedition found another unusually shaped mountain and nicknamed it the Pyramid. But this one didn't even have a pyramid shape. Here's one Antarctic find that definitely won't disappoint you: a giant ice shelf that reminded scientists of the Grand Canyon. A special submarine robot named RAN covered over 600 miles under the thick ice and brought back some amazing footage of icy mountains, valleys, flat plateaus, and swirly patterns made entirely of ice. One of the strangest things RAND found was giant bowl-shaped holes, or scoops, in the ice. Sadly, scientists lost track of the robot. They think that curious Wendell seals may have accidentally bumped into RAND and caused it to get stuck. To save energy, RAND probably shut itself down, and the scientists couldn't find it again. But the team is hoping to build a new robot and continue exploring this icy canyon to see how the patterns under the ice might change over the years. Another huge Antarctic canyon was found thanks to bad weather. A team of sound experts had to pause their work at the Casey Research Station in a storm. Instead of waiting around, they decided to use the unexpected free time to map the seafloor near Adams Glacier. And that's how they found a canyon that is almost 7,000 feet deep, almost 30,000 feet wide, and stretches over 28 miles away from the glacier. During the mapping, they discovered just part of the canyon before they had to go back to the research station. But when bad weather came in again, the ship went back and mapped more of the canyon. They were working in waves up to 13 feet high and super powerful winds, but they managed to get about 15 hours of data to complete their map. On the way back to Australia, they stopped one last time, and now they've got a full picture of the canyon. Studying it is helping scientists learn more about the history of glaciers and the interaction between the Antarctic ice sheet and the ocean. Now, there's a frozen lake in Antarctica called Lake Enigma. For a long time, people thought the lake was completely frozen solid. But during one expedition, researchers found that under the thick ice, there was a layer of liquid water about 40 feet deep. To learn more, they drilled through the ice and sent down a camera to explore what was hiding in the lake's depths. The lake's water, which they think comes from the nearby Amorphous Glacier through a secret underground pathway, was filled with strange microbial life. These tiny microbes lived in mats that covered the lake bed. Some of the mats were thin and spiky, and others looked like crumpled carpets, or even small tree-like shapes that grew up to 16 inches. Many of the microbes could make their own food through photosynthesis, just like plants do, and it gave the lake a high amount of oxygen. One of the coolest discoveries was a type of microbe which usually lives in low-oxygen places. Lake Enigma might be similar to environments on icy moons like Europa or Enceladus, so it could mean that these moons also have hidden water under their ice and possibly microbial life too. One more mind-boggling discovery from Antarctica is tiny pieces of amber in mudstone, found here for the very first time. It took scientists years of studying incredibly well-preserved fossilized roots, pollen, and spores that they found back in 2017. Amber proves that resin-producing trees once grew in Antarctica, part of a lush rainforest that existed near the South Pole during the mid-Cretaceous period. Back then, disclaimer, I wasn't around then, the trees would have had to survive through months of darkness during the long Antarctic winters. Scientists believe they adapted by going dormant for a long time. The amber pieces the scientists found are tiny, but they are beautiful shades of yellow and orange with bumpy surfaces that show how the resin flowed out of the trees. This resin likely leaked out to protect the trees from insects. It was preserved because water quickly covered it and kept it safe from sunlight and air. A scientist was browsing through satellite images for brown trails of penguin waste and found 4 new colonies of emperor penguins at the base of the globe. These new colonies likely have been around for years, though 3 of them are rather small, with fewer than 1,000 breeding penguins each. One of the new colonies was found close to a place called the Lazarev Ice Shelf, where there used to be a larger penguin colony. They thought this colony went extinct in 2019, but it seems the penguins have just moved a bit because of changing sea ice conditions. So studying them can help us learn more about how emperor penguins adapt to changes in the environment. Now, there used to be a giant river system in Antarctica 40 million years ago. Researchers found proof of it after studying soft sediments and hard rocks from the frozen seabed. They looked at tiny bits of radioactive elements, like uranium and lead, and learned that the deeper dirt came from the time of dinosaurs. The dirt closer to the surface was younger and had an interesting pattern, like the kind you see in river deltas today, such as in the Mississippi River or Rio Grande. Scientists found tiny signs of life in the sand. The river that once flowed here started in the Trans-Antarctic Mountains and traveled 930 miles before it reached the sea. Researchers kept studying newer layers of dirt from about 20 million years ago. They hope this will help them predict what the Earth's weather patterns might be like in the future. Consider Lake Enigma. What a fitting name! It's already strange enough because it's not even supposed to exist. But now, we stumbled upon actual life deep beneath it. And this just might help NASA in their search for life in outer space. The lake lies deep in the icy heart of Antarctica, so it's not really a water pool like we're used to, more like a lake-like block of ice, or so we thought. Just recently, Italian scientists discovered a secret that had been buried for ages, an actual body of water, and in this water, life is thriving. Various microorganisms, and even some weird little hunters. Which is super weird, since Enigma sits in a remote and harsh corner of our planet, the northern Victoria Land in Antarctica. The entire South Pole is cold, but in this place, temperatures can plummet to a horrifying minus 41 degrees Fahrenheit, though on average it's around 7. Chilly. Like we said, this lake shouldn't even be there at all. Antarctica is technically the largest desert on Earth, even though it's covered in snow, because it's super dry. There are 0 rains, truly little snowfall, and the sun barely evaporates anything. And even if there is some water, the insane winds make sure to dry everything out super quickly. Putting on our thinking caps, this lake should lose an unimaginable 7 million cubic feet of water every year. Yet, the water remains. Why? No one knows. Scientists say there could be something deep underground that refills it constantly. They just have no idea what that might be. Maybe deep underground rivers, melting ice, or something else entirely. But hence the name, the Enigma Lake. The block of ice we mentioned is permanent and super thick, at least 36 feet of it, and that's higher than a 3-story building. So researchers decided to check out if there's anything beneath it. They used a so-called ground-penetrating radar, a super smart echo detector for the ground. This radar sends invisible radio waves into the Earth. When they hit something underground, like rocks, water, or anything else, they bounce back to the device. By measuring how long it takes for the signal to return and how strong they are, we can determine the distance and what exactly the radar hit. That's how animals like bats, whales, and dolphins can see underwater. And we humans stole this cool nature idea to research buried structures and hidden caves. Scientists used this device all over the Enigma surface. This way, they were able to create an entire map of this under-ice world beneath. The water itself wasn't surprising. It's the unique ecosystem in it that shocked them. Unfortunately, no secret monsters or extraterrestrial secrets this time. But there are microorganisms there that may not exist anywhere else on Earth. Somehow, these creatures have managed to survive in complete isolation and extreme cold. It's not that we don't know these microorganisms, we've met them before, just not exactly like this. There are a couple groups hanging out down there. The first one is Bacteroidota. They love breaking down complex molecules, especially in your stomach, and help digest tough plant fibers. They mostly hang out inside us, but in the outside world, we might occasionally find them in soils and oceans. Then Actinobacteriota, genius chemists among bacteria. They decompose organic materials and help the soil get healthier. They're also famous for producing antibiotics, so we owe a lot of our medicine to them. The third one is Pseudomonadota. These guys weren't a surprise. They're crazy adaptable. They can thrive pretty much anywhere, from soil to water to the human body. Some of them are good, helping plants grow and in nutrient cycles, but others can be opportunistic pathogens. Bad guys. But what is actually a surprise is that Lake Enigma has tons of passibacteria. They're ultra-small even for microorganisms and can barely do anything themselves. So they prefer to live in symbiosis or be little parasites, relying on their hosts for nutrients and other necessities. All these little chompers might be ancient. They could be remnants of a time before the lake froze over completely, which is hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's simply weird to encounter these bacteria in the Enigma Lake, especially the little parasites. Paticibacteria usually love low-oxygen environments, but this lake is very oxygen-rich, not even mentioning an almost 40 feet of ice above. So all this means that even though we know who these guys are, this specific species might be new to us. They could have evolved with some unique adaptations and abilities using the lake's unusual chemistry. They probably rely on a super simple and delicate food web. Some of the microorganisms produce energy from light, well, whatever light gets down there, or the lake's chemicals. The symbiosis guys most likely survive by living on or inside their neighbors. Yep, these microscopic creatures hunt each other. Nope, things can't be peaceful even in a place like that. If we find out what their secret to survival is, we might learn more about chemistry, medicine, and even extraterrestrial life. Because if life can endure such extreme conditions, then it can probably appear pretty much anywhere, including our closest neighbors, Europa or Enceladus, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. They definitely hide oceans beneath their frozen surfaces, and now there's a very high chance there might be some life there. Antarctica must be the closest thing we have to extraterrestrial exploration before we actually land on other planets. It's full of hidden mysteries and surprising creatures. Even outside of Lake Enigma, the South Pole harbors life. Just take the McMurdo Dry Valleys, which are often referred to as Earthly Mars. These are among the most mysterious and extreme places on our planet. They're stretching across Victoria Land in Antarctica, and this is one of the driest places on Earth. Makes sense if you remember the name. Surprisingly, unlike other parts of the South Pole, this land is almost entirely devoid of snow and ice, just lots of super cold ground. There might even be some sand dunes nestled here and there between the rugged mountains. The ground is mostly covered in loose gravel, scattered with ancient rocks made of granite, and something interesting called gneiss, just spelled differently. It's the type of rock that's been through a lot, literally. It's usually born when granite and sedimentary rocks have to endure insane pressure or horrifying heat for a while, a process called metamorphism. These conditions are so intense that they literally rearrange the minerals into layers. That's why gneiss has such beautiful foliated looks. It's the planet's version of baking a layered cake. It's amazing because this place is almost exactly the way it was millions of years ago. These valleys are frozen in time, and they give us a little glimpse into Earth's distant past. And that includes life. Once again, local winds are absolutely terrifying gusts of cold air racing downhill, and they evaporate snow faster than it can even melt. So, logically, you shouldn't find much water here, not even mentioning life. But somehow, you can still stumble across frozen lakes and saline ponds in the dry valleys. And local life stretches all reason and our understanding of biology. It exists inside the rocks themselves. Microorganisms are hidden in slightly moist cracks and crevices. Deep inside, there's endolithic bacteria. These guys are super chill. Instead of moving around like other microorganisms, they always stay put inside their little rocky homes. How do they survive? Through photosynthesis. Just like plants, they take teeny tiny parts of light that gets in crevices and acts like little solar panels, getting energy from the sun. Meanwhile, in another place, beneath the Taylor Glacier, there's bacteria that literally doesn't eat anything. Not comfort, not sunlight, not even oxygen. These guys rely on a diet of dusty rocks and sulfur to fuel their weird metabolisms. By breaking down sulfur and iron, they get energy to sustain themselves. This way, they easily survive in deep seas at sub-freezing temperatures, completely cut off from sunlight, oxygen, and the world itself. This place is fascinating for both its life and the lack of it. In some parts of the valleys, like University Valley, yes, that's what it's called, the permafrost is so harsh that no microbes were found at all. This might be one of the only places on Earth where life appears to be completely absent, a quite scary idea. Anyway, now scientists are thinking about learning more about Lake Enigma and drilling this Mars-like environment, exactly for that reason, to see how we could get samples from Mars in the future. There once was a kingdom where the ancient Egyptians traveled to buy gifts for pharaohs, sort of like an ancient shopping mall. This kingdom, named the Land of Punt, was rich in luxury goods, including gold, aromatic resins, blackwood, ebony, ivory, and exotic animals like leopards and baboons. All of these sound like great gift ideas to me. The Land of Punt was an especially important trading partner for Egypt for over 1,000 years. But if you plan to go there, the bad news is that it hasn't survived to these days, and nobody knows for sure exactly where Punt was located. We only know about it from records. The most famous of them were left on the walls of the temple of Queen Hatshepsut, who had sent an expedition to Punt. Scientists have been trying to find the exact location of this rich land for over 150 years. It could have been southeast of Egypt, in a coastal region south of it along the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, and the Indian Ocean, or it could have covered the Horn of Africa and the area across the sea in southern Arabia. Now researchers were finally able to narrow down the possible locations thanks to a study of baboon mummies. Ancient Egyptians admired baboons and even thought they were related to the deity of the moon and wisdom. One species, the sacred baboon, was often shown in wall paintings, sitting with its tail curled to the right, and was mummified in this position. Another type, the olive baboon, was wrapped up in one giant cocoon. Both types were found in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings. But if you remember geography lessons, baboons just don't wander around Egypt, so they must have been brought there through trade with other regions. Primatologists, Egyptologists, geographers, and geochemists look at the mummified baboons from two different time periods in ancient Egypt. Some were from the New Kingdom period, and others were from the Ptolemaic period. The scientists did some more hard work and analyzed tissues from 155 baboons from 75 separate places in eastern Africa and southern Arabia. Those were all areas that they thought could be the ancient Land of Punt. They measured oxygen and strontium in the baboons' bodies. When animals drink water and eat plants, their teeth, hair, and bones show a geographic signature of where they've lived, thanks to these elements they contain. Scientists use a special method called isotopic mapping and found out that the New Kingdom baboons they analyzed came from a location in Eritrea, Ethiopia, or Somalia. 5 mummified baboons from the Ptolemaic period had strontium levels that matched those found in Egypt. So ancient Egyptians might have had a special place to breed and keep baboons, probably in Memphis, a city in Lower Egypt, not Tennessee. Meanwhile, paleontologists from New Zealand got lucky, as some boulders had split open from the tide and revealed fossils of the largest penguin that has ever lived on Earth. The scientists used laser scanners to make 3D models of the ancient penguin bones. They compared these bones to the flipper size of modern penguins and did some math as to how much the old penguins might have weighed. Today, the biggest penguins, emperor penguins, weigh between 55 to 100 pounds. Researchers think that the penguins from the past that they found weighed around 340 pounds, real giants in the penguin world. These huge flightless birds lived in the oceans around New Zealand more than 50 million years ago, after the dinosaurs went extinct. They totally took advantage of their big bodies to stay warm in the cold water. They might have even traveled the world thanks to it. And they'd scare off any predators, but they didn't have any. The asteroid that took down the dinosaurs also got rid of most big marine reptiles, and the ancestors of seals and whales were still living on land. Back in 1992, 4 farmers in China were draining water from their ponds and accidentally bumped into a ship full of gold and ancient statues worth millions. Just kidding, they actually found the Longgu Caves. Those are 24 big caves created by people a long, long time ago. Even though they are so large and well-made, No one knows who built them, why they were built, or how they were built. Experts think the caves are at least 2,000 years old, but they don't understand why these caves aren't mentioned in any historical records. All of the Longyou caverns look the same and aren't connected to each other. Each cave has one entrance connected to a vertical shaft with a carved staircase. Rain and water from the surface can flow into the caves through these stairs. To manage this water, the caves have special grooves, channels, and a system to catch the water at the bottom. So it looks like the ancient builders were real pros when it came to drainage and water management. Maybe my town could learn a lesson from them, as it turns into Venice after every heavy shower. Anyway, the caverns were built below a hill, named after a bird that is one of the most respected creatures in Chinese mythology and culture. It symbolizes all the best things, like high virtue, grace, and the union of yin and yang. Scientists think there could be a connection between the caverns and the bird, but it's just a theory so far. Experts from the National Institute of Ocean Technology in India were doing their routine pollution surveys when they found some structures that looked like a city underwater. Using special sonar technology, the team found big geometric shapes on the ocean floor. They brought up different items from the site, like pottery, beads, sculptures, parts of walls, and even human bones and teeth. They thought the ruins belonged to a civilization older than the Bronze Age Indus Valley Civilization, which is the earliest urban culture of the Indian subcontinent that we know of so far. But not everyone joined in on celebrating this awesome discovery. Some archaeologists refused to believe it and thought it could be some computer tricks. And even when they saw hundreds of artifacts from the ocean floor, they said an ancient river could have brought them there from someplace else. The team that discovered the underwater site decided to prove they were right. They chose a piece of wood as their main evidence. They tested it and found it was 9,500 years old. That could be the age of the entire site. Skeptics still insist that we can't rewrite all human history because of one piece of wood. Even 23 years since the discovery, no one is sure about the final answer. This is partly because it's hard to explore the site. It's in extremely dangerous waters with strong currents and riptides. During the cool Antarctica's summer, from late November through January, geologists from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee climbed the frozen slopes of the McIntyre Promontory in the Transantarctic Mountains. High above the ice fields, they looked through the mountain's gray rocks for fossils from when the continent had green forests. By the end of their trip, the geologists found fossil pieces from 13 trees. These fossils show that the trees are over 260 million years old. This means the forest grew at the end of the Permian period before the first dinosaurs even appeared. More than 90% of all species on Earth disappeared back then, including the polar forests. These trees would have been very tough if they grew in Antarctica and could have survived. But a huge increase in gases like carbon dioxide and methane must have taken them down. This Antarctic forest is a terrific way for us to see what life was like before the extinction, and we might even understand what caused it. It also shows us how plants were different back then from those we are used to now. Hey now, get ready to dive into the Sea of Mysteries, also known as the Black Sea. It is the largest inland body of water in the world, bigger than the entire state of California. It has dozens of lost ships and some secret underwater tunnels. And some people believe it's an ancient quarry that was mined out in 6 stages. The Black Sea has distinct vertical layers that don't mix, with higher and lower salinity. The salty water comes from the Mediterranean, and fresh water comes from rivers. 10 of the largest rivers in Europe flow into the Black Sea. It receives more fresh water from the rivers and rainfall than it loses from evaporation. The extra water flows through the Bosphorus into the Marmara Sea. There are 2 flows going through the straits. The upper flow leaves the Black Sea and takes surface water out of it. The bottom flow carries salt water from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. That's why the upper layers of the Black Sea are less dense than its saltier lower layers. The oxygen that comes from the atmosphere and photosynthesis stays in the surface layers. Everything deeper than about 300 feet in the middle and up to 500 feet near the edge is not fit for life. Only certain bacteria can survive in these conditions. Although there's no air deep down in the Black Sea, the upper layer is home to around 750 species of phytoplankton. Eggs and larvae of fish and invertebrates chill in coastal regions. There are also 180 fish species in the Black Sea, and some of them are valuable, such as horse mackerel, spiny dogfish, and sprat. The water level in the Black Sea is always the same because there are no high or low tides, so the sea is always calm, quiet, and serene on the surface. But it has one surprise feature: an underwater river. It's a current of salty water flowing through the Bosphorus Strait and along the seabed. This amazing discovery was made by scientists from the University of Leeds and was announced in 2010. It's the first undersea river of its kind ever found. The river forms because salty water from the Mediterranean Sea spills through the Bosphorus Strait into the Black Sea, where the water is much less salty. The no-air zone of the sea is an ideal conservation chamber for what's hiding on its bottom. The Black Sea is like a treasure trove for shipwrecks, and we discovered it by accident. Some maritime archaeologists were studying sea levels to see how quickly the water levels rose after the last ice age, and they ran across over 40 previously unknown shipwrecks as a complete bonus. Researchers used 2 remotely operated vehicles to explore the seafloor and the wrecks. Thanks to it, we have a video and detailed 3D images of the ships that were stitched together from thousands of high-resolution photos. According to the New York Times, some of the standout discoveries among the 44 ships found include a medieval training vessel from the 13th or 14th century. Expedition members nicknamed another ship from the Ottoman Empire the Flower of the Black Sea for its beautiful petal carvings. The team also noticed unusual details on other ships, like coiled ropes, chisel marks, rudders, and other carvings. So far, they haven't announced any plans to excavate the shipwrecks, but the ships might be filled with historical treasures like books, parchments, and documents. It's worth a try to rescue them. The most extraordinary discovery in the Black Sea is what archaeologists believe to be the world's oldest intact shipwreck. It has been lying undisturbed for over 2,400 years. This ancient Greek vessel, 75 feet long, was found with its mast, rudders, and rowing benches all still in place, over a mile beneath the surface. Researchers believe the ship was a trading vessel, like those depicted on ancient Greek pottery, such as the Siren vase in the British Museum. This vase, or vase, dating from the same period, shows a vessel carrying Odysseus past the Sirens. The team took a small piece for carbon dating, and the results confirmed it as the oldest intact shipwreck known to humankind. The fact that it's so elaborate and well-preserved deserves a standing ovation for shipbuilders of the ancient world. Without microbes, worms, or other creatures to eat away the wrecks, it's no wonder the ships are in almost perfect condition. If the Titanic had sunk in these waters, we would have found it in a much better state now, not being eaten by nasty underwater microorganisms. Now, there's an interesting theory called the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis, which suggests a huge flood happened around 7,500 years ago. 2 geologists in the 1990s suggested that at the end of the last ice age, when the Earth's climate was heating up, ice sheets were melting and sea levels were rising. The Black Sea was a much smaller freshwater lake. It was separated from the Mediterranean Sea by a natural dam at the Bosphorus Strait. As global sea levels rose, the Mediterranean overflowed into the Black Sea basin. They suggest the sea level rose by 6 inches every day, flooded coastal settlements, and changed the environment for good. Samples from the Black Sea floor show a sudden shift from freshwater to marine species around that time, which means there was a rapid influx of salt water. Underwater surveys have also found what look like the old shorelines and human-made structures. So, people were living in areas now submerged by the Black Sea. Plus, the timing of this flood matches up with known patterns of human migration into Europe, Asia, and Africa. They also say this flood could be the terrible flood from the story of Noah's Ark. Critics of the deluge theory say the evidence isn't as straightforward as it seems. Some think the transition from freshwater to saltwater in the Black Sea was more gradual than one sudden flood. They're also debating if people left the settlements before they went underwater or as a result. An old chronicle that's been around for about a century says there were 2 underground tunnels starting in what is now Romania and Bulgaria and stretching all the way under the Black Sea to Turkey. Back in the day, peasants used these tunnels to move their flocks of sheep to the Ottoman Empire and countries on the Asia Minor Peninsula. Who built these tunnels and why they run under the sea is a complete mystery. At some point, the entrances to these tunnels were sealed off for national security and were under tight guard. The security forces knew all about these massive tunnels and kept them off limits. In the 1980s, a group of people working on the Danube-Black Sea Canal accidentally found another entrance to these mysterious tunnels. This one was in a cemetery in a town of Romania. Canal workers used it to regularly cross over into Bulgaria. One more cool thing about these 2 tunnels is that some people think they were built thousands of years ago. If you ever try to dig a tunnel under the sea, you'll know how tricky it is even now with all the tech we have. So if the tunnels are really that old, whoever built them was super advanced for their time. Now, there's an urban legend that says that the Black Sea has its own version of the Bermuda Triangle. Fishers describe some wild whirlpool that appears out of nowhere and drags entire flocks of birds, ships, and even small islands under the sea. And once, things got even wilder with a ship that vanished under weird conditions in 1944. It was during daylight, and some black fog with green flashing sparkles suddenly surrounded the vessel. No one has ever seen it since, and no one knows for sure if the story is true. But it sure adds a spooky touch to the mysteries of the Black Sea.
It was the beginning of the 20th century, and 2 rivals, Robert Scott and Roald Amundsen, set on their expeditions to become the first people in history to reach the South Pole. The race wasn't easy, and it ended tragically for Scott. Amundsen has won and set his tent on the pole before his rivals. A member of Scott's expedition known as Terra Nova, British geologist Thomas Griffith Taylor, not only survived the harsh conditions but also made an unexpected discovery. He found a waterfall of what appeared to be blood at the rocky base of the glacier, which now has his name, in 1911. It took scientists more than a century to figure out what is behind the eerie coloring. A team of American scientists journeyed to Taylor Glacier with powerful electron microscopes to analyze its contents. Previous studies had scratched the surface of the Crimson Enigma, but no one had previously done a full-scale analysis of its mineralogical makeup. These researchers unleashed a whole arsenal of analytical equipment and spotted little iron-rich nanospheres. These teeny-tiny particles, 1/100th the size of human red blood cells, originate from ancient microbes. They flourish abundantly in the meltwaters of Taylor Glacier. These nanospheres are jam-packed with iron, silicon, calcium, aluminum, and sodium, forming a unique composition that paints the subglacial water a vivid shade of red. These nanospheres don't have the usual crystalline structure found in minerals, which is why previous detection methods failed to spot them. Taylor Glacier's icy depths harbor an ancient microbial community that has thrived in isolation for thousands or possibly even millions of years. This discovery could help us in the search for life outside of Earth. Dr. Ken Levy, a research scientist at Johns Hopkins University, has some impressive expertise in planetary materials and the analysis of Martian samples. He decided to find out what would happen if a Mars rover landed in Antarctica. Could it figure out what makes bloodfalls so mesmerizingly red? So, researchers treated bloodfalls as a simulated Martian landing site. They used techniques inspired by the rovers exploring the red planet. The samples they collected were sent to Johns Hopkins processing facilities. There, Livy unleashed the power of transmission electron microscopy and revealed the enigmatic nanospheres. He made the conclusion that our current methods of analyzing other planets' surfaces with rovers fall short. They can't unravel the true nature of environmental materials, especially on chilly planets like Mars. These materials might be super tiny and non-crystalline, throwing off our detection methods. To truly grasp the essence of rocky planets, we'll need transmission electron microscopes. Strapping one onto a Mars rover isn't feasible yet, but it could mean a start of a new era in space exploration. Have you ever seen a waterfall on fire? Every February, when the stars align just right, Horsetail Fall in Yosemite National Park gets a sensational makeover. As the sun sets, its rays hit the waterfall at the perfect angle, transforming it into a blazing display of vibrant orange and red hues. We don't know exactly who and when discovered this natural miracle. The original valley dwellers may have known about it, but they kept it to themselves. It wasn't until 1973 that photographer Galen Rowell captured the first known photo of the waterfall, bringing it into the limelight. Since then, the firefall has become a global sensation, spreading like wildfire on social media and drawing crowds from far and wide. This magnificent cascade draws hundreds of spectators every year, but they can only see the show under certain conditions. First things first, Horsetail Fall needs a flowing stream. If there's not enough snowpack in February, the waterfall won't have enough water to create the magic. The temperatures must be warm enough to melt the snowpack during the day. If it's too chilly, the snow will stay frozen, and the fiery spectacle won't ignite. Second, we need a clear western sky at sunset. Those sunbeams need a straight path to hit Horsetail Fall and make it come alive. And since the weather in Yosemite is ever-changing, clouds can magically clear up just in time for the show. If all the conditions are just right, you'll witness the Yosemite Firefall in all its glory for about 10 minutes. The mystery of the sailing stones in California's Death Valley National Park has puzzled scientists for years. Heavy stones seem to have a mind of their own and move across Racetrack Playa, a dried-up lake bed. They leave behind a trail on the cracked mud. There were all kinds of theories to explain this phenomenon, from magnetic fields or dust devils, which are strong whirlwinds, to mischievous pranksters. No one has actually witnessed these rocks in action, which only added to the mystery. In 2006, a NASA scientist named Ralph Lorenz entered the scene. He was studying weather conditions on other planets, but he couldn't resist the allure of Death Valley and those elusive sailing stones. He had an eureka moment while tinkering at his kitchen table with a Tupperware container. Lorenz filled the container with water, leaving a small rock poking out, and chucked it in the freezer. Then he placed this icy construction in a big tray of water with sand at the bottom and gently blew on it. The rock began to glide across the water, leaving a trail in the sand. Lorenz had been studying how ice can make big rocks float and move along tidal beaches in the Arctic Sea. Applying this knowledge, he and his research team figured out that, under certain winter conditions in Death Valley, enough water and ice could form to make the rocks float across Racetrack Playa in a light breeze. And as they glided, they left their mark in the muddy terrain. The River of Five Colors, Cano Cristales in Colombia, has the unofficial title of the most beautiful river in the world. For most of the year, it looks like any other regular river. The real magic happens between the wet and dry seasons, when the water level is just perfect. This unique river floor is lined with a special plant, and when the conditions are right, it bursts into a dazzling display of colors. Think vibrant reds, stunning yellows, and lush greens, all mingling with the blue water. It's like stepping into a living rainbow with 1,000 shades in between. This phenomenal display only lasts for a few weeks, from September through November. During Colombia's wet season, the river flows too fast and deep, covering up the river floor and denying the plant the sunlight it needs to turn red. And in the dry season, there's simply not enough water to support the vibrant life in the river. So you have to catch it at just the right time. The reason behind Maldivian beaches glowing in the dark at night isn't a mystery, but it doesn't make them any less impressive. It happens thanks to the bioluminescent plankton. These tiny creatures are like little underwater disco balls, emitting a cool blue glow when they are agitated or on the move. Imagine walking along the shoreline and leaving behind glowing footprints. You can even take a night swim amongst these magical plankton. Researchers have discovered that their bioluminescence is actually a clever defense mechanism against predators. When these microorganisms flash their little blue lights, it disorients and surprises their attackers. The plankton produces this light using a chemical called luciferin. These enchanting plankton can appear at any time of the year. The best chances of seeing them in all their glowing glory are from June to December. During this period, there's a higher volume of plankton in the seas of the Maldives, creating the perfect conditions for a luminous show after the sun sets and the night sky takes over. You'll only witness the magic of bioluminescent plankton when tidal currents bring them close to the shore in large numbers. It's hard to predict exactly when this spectacular show will happen, so make sure to do your research and prepare to take photos with a high ISO to capture it, exactly like it looks in travel catalogs.
There's something really bizarre going on at these 12 points scattered across the Earth. The vile vortices, as they're called, are these creepy spots over the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, and the North and South Poles, where weird forces seem to take over. You've probably heard of the most famous one, the Bermuda Triangle. It's believed that more than 50 ships and 20 airplanes have mysteriously disappeared in this area, which is located between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. But what most people don't realize is that the Bermuda Triangle actually has 11 siblings, and these other spots can be even more terrifying. Let's start with Mohenjo-Daro. This was a thriving city located in what is now Pakistan. Built around 2500 before the Common Era, this urban center was once home to about 40,000 people. But then, suddenly, people abandoned it by the year 1700 before the Common Era. In the 1940s, an archaeologist discovered 39 human skeletons at the site, which fueled the theory that the city was invaded by some other civilization at some point. But honestly, it's hard to confirm that, since archaeology doesn't really explain the city's sudden destruction or the disappearance of its people. It's led to a bunch of bizarre theories. One of them talks about an ancient extraterrestrial race that might have lived there, and a malevolent wind that swept through the city. Another ancient city with a similar mystery is the Great Zimbabwe. Its construction began in the 11th century, and at its peak it housed up to 18,000 people. But for reasons we'll probably never fully understand, it was abandoned in the 15th century. Archaeologists were really interested in this place, and that's when things got even weirder. They found 8 of these birds, now called the Zimbabwe birds. These soapstone sculptures were found sitting on stone columns that were over 90 centimeters tall. Nothing like them has ever been found anywhere else, and their meaning is still a total mystery. Some think each bird represents a new king, but other theories suggest they were ancient animals very dear to the people who lived there. Adding to the mystery, local legends talk about a strange, short man who's sometimes seen wandering around, but he always disappears before anyone can get close. Then there's Easter Island, another one of the 12 vile vortices. It's located in the eastern Pacific Ocean, and it's famous for its nearly 1,000 enormous statues called moai. We still don't know what they mean, or how they were made. Some of them are almost 30 feet tall and weigh as much as 80 tons. Today, it wouldn't be that tough to move and carve these statues, but we're talking about a period between the years 1100 and 1680. So nobody really knows how they did it. Some specialists believe these statues were carried across the island, while others think they were pushed on log rollers. But the most bizarre theories suggest extraterrestrials were involved. Algeria is another land rich in ancient mysteries, and one of the most fascinating is something called the Jeddars. These are 13 monuments with square stone bases and angular mounds, built between the 4th and 7th centuries. But the weird part is, no one knows their purpose. One of them had an inscription in Latin, but it was so worn down that the message was nearly impossible to read. The best guess so far is that these monuments were probably tombs for royalty, although no one knows exactly who was supposed to be buried there. What we do know is that there are many myths related to strange disappearances in the region. The next mysterious spot is located south of Tokyo in the Pacific Ocean, and it's called the Dragon's Triangle. Does that name ring a bell? Yep. Just like the Bermuda Triangle, this area is known for strange disappearances of airplanes and ships. One of the most chilling stories dates back to 1945, when a plane allegedly vanished. The pilot supposedly sent a radio transmission right before the aircraft disappeared, claiming that something strange was happening in the sky, like it was opening up or something. While this story is definitely eerie, the truth behind it and many other Dragon's Triangle legends is still up for debate. If you type Hamakulia volcano into Google Earth, you'll find it located in Hawaii's Ring of Fire. But this place is so shrouded in mystery that it's hard to find much information about it. Some legends speak of unusual electrical energy being detected in the area, and there's even a story about an eyewitness who claimed to see a plane flying over it totally disappear from the radar. Another eerie spot is the South Atlantic Anomaly, which is an area on Earth where natural radiation flows out of control. While this doesn't affect our daily lives on the surface, it has a pretty big impact on Earth's atmosphere. The radiation there is so intense that it can knock out the onboard computers of spacecraft and interfere with the data collected by satellites passing through the area. To deal with this, specialists had to add an additional shield to the International Space Station. The South Atlantic Anomaly is also linked to a weird event that astronauts experience called cosmic ray visual phenomena. They've reported seeing random flashes of light or shooting stars out there in space, but it's all just some kind of illusion. From wild radiation to strange seismic activity. The Wharton Basin in the Indian Ocean is a place known for unusual tectonic events. In April of 2012, a massive earthquake measuring magnitude 8.6 hit the region. This was considered the largest intraplate earthquake ever recorded, meaning it happened within a tectonic plate rather than at its boundary. This caught the attention of scientists, who now speculate that the region might be forming a new boundary between the Australian and Indian plates. But for now, this is all still one big mystery. Now let's head to the Pacific Ocean. More specifically, to the New Hebrides Trench. This submarine trench is about 750 miles long and 45 miles wide. It formed when the Australian plate slid under the New Hebrides plate. There's no doubt that this is one of the creepiest and deepest spots in the ocean. The danger isn't just down in the deep sea either, as this trench has been connected to several earthquakes that affected New Caledonia and Vanuatu. This area also has some strange features. For example, when scientists explored it, they didn't find a single grenadier fish down there. This type of fish is one of the most common deep-sea creatures you'd expect to see in trenches around the Pacific. So why aren't they around the New Hebrides Trench? Maybe they know something we don't. The two remaining vile vortices are the North and South Poles. These two are on the opposite ends of the planet, but they share one thing in common: strange disappearances. One of the most famous stories from the North Pole happened in 1897. 3 brave explorers set out on a journey to reach the North Pole using a hot air balloon. But they never completed their mission. Their mysterious disappearance remains one of the most intriguing, unsolved mysteries in the history of Arctic exploration. The South Pole is also known for similar mysteries. It's believed that hundreds of people may be buried beneath the snow and ice of the coldest continent on Earth. Even with all the advancements in technology and knowledge, the South Pole can still be extremely dangerous for anyone who ventures there. The temperatures can drop to almost minus 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and the winds can get up to 200 miles per hour. And that's definitely enough reason to stay away. Now that you're familiar with the 12 vile vortices, let me tell you something even stranger. If you look at a map, you'll see that these places are arranged in a way that looks pretty similar across the globe. Here's the weird part. If you connect these spots where unexplained events have occurred, you actually form the geometric shape of an icosahedron. This could be just a huge coincidence, but the fact that these mystery spots align with this shape makes them even more intriguing. There's a place on Earth so dangerous that even the most fearsome creatures of today wouldn't last a moment there. It used to exist in what we now call southeastern Morocco, the land called the Kemkem Beds. The story of this place stretches back to the Cretaceous period, about 100 million years ago. It might have looked like a beautiful place at first sight, a lush green forest, rivers glittering in the sun, until you meet some terrifying dinosaur. The lions or sharks of today are nothing compared to what the fossils show us. The Kemkem Beds were dominated by terrifying predators, and above them all, 3 of the largest predatory dinosaurs ever discovered. For example, Spinosaurus. This dinosaur was unlike anything you can imagine. A half reptile, half monster standing over 50 feet tall, bigger than a T-Rex. This hybrid with a crocodile-like snout and a sail on its back hunted the forests. But this dino could dive into the rivers, so not even waters were safe from it. It could catch huge fish, as if plucking them from the shallows. There was also Carcharodontosaurus, a carnivore with the name that literally means shark-toothed lizard. Its razor-sharp teeth could slice through flesh with terrifying ease. This monster stood almost as tall as a house and was faster, stronger, and more aggressive than nearly anything that had ever walked the earth. There was also Deltadromedus, a raptor-like dinosaur built for speed. It was a quick-moving ninja that stalked its prey with horrifying precision. Oh, and the skies were a fun place too, with all these pterosaur creatures flying around. These guys are often mistaken for flying dinosaurs, but they were actually a different kind, more like close cousins of dinosaurs. These majestic reptiles soared above the Kemkem Beds and had wingspans that could stretch up to 30 feet. The fingers were feathery, with a 4th finger kinda like bats. They could glide through the air so easily thanks to their super light skeleton. But it wasn't just the dinosaurs that made the Kemkem Beds so horrifying. The waters also hid their own dark secrets. They were home to giant, terrifying fish and crocodile-like creatures. Their jaws were strong enough to crush bone, and they were lurking beneath the surface, waiting for anything unlucky enough to stumble into their path. One of the river creatures was Sarcosuchus, also called the super croc. Being about 40 feet long, it could easily swallow an adult human. Or better yet, it could take on a full-grown dinosaur and win. Its jaws snapped with unimaginable force, and no creature, not even Spinosaurus, was safe from it. Coelacanths could also hang out in the rivers. It was a monstrous predator that could easily swallow a huge fish whole. They had these creepy, icky fins that moved in a way similar to how human arms and legs move. And they could also kind of raise their heads like humans because of a special joint in their skull. Ew. Fun fact, we thought these monsters had gone extinct 60 million years ago, together with dinosaurs. But recently, we rediscovered them living and thriving in the Indian Ocean. Turns out they were just hiding in the deep waters. They probably didn't even notice the dinosaur asteroid or humans at all. Yay? Don't worry, over millions of years, they became basically harmless. They got 4 to 5 times smaller, even though they still weigh about 200 pounds. Just imagine what they were like back in the day. Kemkem waters were also home to giant lungfish and other creepy aquatic creatures, so you couldn't even drink or take a swim safely without getting bitten by something. Whew, what a place. Even turtles there were the size of cars. Imagine trying to survive in a world where creatures like this are literally everywhere, and I mean everywhere. This place was unique not because huge beasts lived there, but because of the sheer number of predators. You might think, it shouldn't be that easy for all these predators to hang out in one place, right? And you're right. Seems like prey was scarce there. That's even more chilling. All the predators just wandered around, hunting whatever meager life remained. And if there's none, then fighting each other. For years, scientists have wondered why it was the case. Maybe that's just how life was back then, and all corners of Earth were crazy like that. Or is there something special about this place? Some even say that maybe it's just because we only found predators' fossils. Well, normal, friendly animals have disappeared, and that the fossil record might be skewed. But who knows? And the environment itself was just as fascinating as the beasts who lived there, just a bit more friendly. It's hard to imagine, but back in the day, this desert was a green paradise, humid and full of rivers. The heat of the sun scorched the land. The climate was hot, so hot that even the poles were warm. The weather there was extreme. Dry seasons followed by intense storms, which shaped the land and life. The giant rivers carved their way through this landscape. They stretched from the Sahara, emptying into the ancient Tethys Ocean to the north. If you were there, you'd see vast, interconnected basins, and beyond them, the central Atlantic Ocean. The floodplain stretched out beneath a sweltering sky. The rivers were just as wild as local animals, flowing lazily one day, but raging like furious beasts the next. At first, these rivers were powerful, carving deep channels through the land and creating wide sandbanks. But over time, they slowed down, and the landscape changed into shallow ponds and salt-covered flats. As water gradually faded away, it left behind a patchwork of wetlands and slow-moving waters. Right now, the Kem Beds is a vast, rugged desert where time has stood still for millions of years. If you visited it, you'd see a giant escarpment, its rocky face winding along the border of Morocco and Algeria, bathed in the sun's harsh light. Beneath your feet would lie layers of fossilized history. That's one of the reasons why scientists were long fascinated with this place. It must be one of the most comprehensive collections of fossils ever discovered in northern Africa. There are fossils from other parts of Africa, of course, like Egypt's Bahariya Formation. But they don't tell us much about life during this time, not like Kem. That's all because those rivers we mentioned in hotter and drier places, they've eroded or still remain buried under the sand. The first discoveries from Kem began in the late 1940s. A scientist named Schubert uncovered bony fish fossils among the escarpment near the Morocco-Algeria border. Just a few years later, a paleontologist, René Lavocat, took things to the next level. Traveling by camelback, he scoured the desert landscape and uncovered a real treasure trove of fossils. He found the partial skeleton of a massive herbivore dinosaur. Finally, at least one peaceful creature in the Kem Beds. This long-necked giant roamed the ancient river valleys and ate leaves like a good boy. For the next several decades, scientists only did small-scale fossil hunting expeditions to this place. There were modest discoveries made here and there. Then, in the 1970s, German paleontologist Helmut Alberti led his team to the Kem Beds, and that's when things took a wild turn. They uncovered fossils of prehistoric fish, crocodiles, dinosaurs, and pieces of the infamous Spinosaurus. Imagine being one of the scientists on that team. They were probably jumping from excitement. By the mid-1990s, the fossil game changed dramatically. Incredible new species were identified from the Kem Beds. Over the years, the discovery pace has only accelerated. Paleontologists, armed with new tools and techniques, have uncovered more fossils than ever before, and there's only more to come. Thousands of years ago, a huge meteor weighing 2 million tons crashed into Earth at a speed of around 56,000 miles per hour. Sounds like a big deal, and it was. It actually created Lonar Lake in Maharashtra. When you see it from above, it might look like any other lake, but the sand there is magnetic, and it makes compasses go haywire. First off, It's a soda lake. Nah, it's not filled with Coke. It's just another name for an alkaline lake. The pH levels there vary from 9 to 12, whereas humans enjoy ranges from 6.5 to 8.5. So it's not really advisable to bathe there, not to mention to drink such water. There's a little round dip about 2,300 feet away from the main lake, which folks think was made by a piece of the main meteor. Near this lake, there is a Hanuman temple that has an idol carved from rock, and it's said to have some pretty strong magnetic vibes. Also, local farmers are draining water from Ambar Lake. Sometimes people refer to this lake as Chota Lonar, which means Little Lonar. This nearly perfect oval is one of only 2 natural craters in the world made entirely from basalt, a dark, finely textured volcanic rock. The water there is 7 times saltier than ocean water, and sometimes the lake can turn pink due to particular bacteria. Whenever you open up a tap to fill a glass of water, water goes from top to bottom because gravity, duh. It's hard to imagine it acting the other way around, but turns out there are many waterfalls that can defy gravity and go in the opposite direction. That's called a reverse waterfall, and it happens when super strong winds whip through a waterfall, pushing the water back up. It's especially common for those windy fall and winter months. You usually need winds of at least 46 miles per hour to see this cool trick in action. It's actually not as rare as one may think, and you can find these wild reverse waterfalls all over the globe, from Australia to India, Japan, the UK, and the US. In Australia, in areas like Sydney, the Central Coast, and Royal National Park, winds around 43 miles per hour have been known to turn waterfalls upside down. Yep, it's all about the wind going this fast. Please put aside all those weird myths about Australia being in the southern hemisphere, like the one about the water in the toilet flushing in the opposite direction. This is nothing but an urban myth. In India, near Mumbai, and in places like Sandan Valley and Amboli Hills, waterfalls get blown upward during the monsoon. And if you're ever in the Faroe Islands, you can witness this unique phenomenon happen regularly due to the region's geography and fierce winds from the North Atlantic. Magnetic Hill in Ladakh, India, is a fascinating spot, sitting at about 14,000 feet high, right along the Srinagar-Leh Highway, just 16 miles from Leh City. It's known for a quirky gravitational trick where parked cars mysteriously roll uphill when left in neutral, defying logic and catching the attention of visitors from all over. Locals have their own myths, viewing it as a path between heaven and earth. You'll want to stop by between June and September when the weather is just right and the optical illusion effect is at its peak, typically from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. In Brazil, there's this street called Rua do Amendoim that seems to defy the laws of physics, leaving many puzzled as they walk or drive down it. Locals affectionately call it Peanut Street, and there's never a shortage of parking spots. That's mainly because if a car is parked without the emergency brake, it starts to roll uphill all on its own, picking up speed as it goes. People have all sorts of wild theories about why this happens. Some say the hill is haunted, while others think there's a huge iron ore deposit beneath it pulling cars up like a magnet. But believe it or not, the truth is that this strange occurrence is just an optical illusion. The street looks steep, but it actually has a slight dip. So, while it seems like cars are rolling uphill, they're really just going downhill. Still, that hasn't stopped folks from filming countless videos of this quirky sight. Located on the beautiful Black Sea coast, Ureki is a chill beach resort town known for its unique magnetic sands that are all about health and wellness. These sands have been getting attention for their healing powers since the 1800s. Helping people tackle various health issues. Ureki's magnetic sand is packed with minerals like magnetite and quartz. It's got an unusual magnetic content of about 23%, making its magnetic field way stronger than that of regular sand. The Hessdalen Lights are mysterious glowing orbs seen in a 7-mile stretch of the Hessdalen Valley in central Norway. These lights have been popping up since at least the 1930s and can be spotted both day and night. They usually shine in bright white, yellow, or red and can hover, move quickly, or sway gently. Their appearances can last from a few seconds to over an hour. Though there were many sightings, especially between 1981 and 1984, the frequency has gone down to about 10 to 20 a year as of 2010. Various groups, like Project Hastalin, have tried investigating these lights since 1983, using methods ranging from field studies to scientific research. As for what these lights actually are, no one really knows for sure. Some sightings have been explained away as things like car headlights or astronomical objects. One theory suggests they might come from a chemical reaction involving airborne dust from local mines. Another idea is that they could be clusters of particles interacting in a specific way due to the area's geology. Some researchers have even proposed that the lights might be a result of piezoelectricity due to certain rock types in the valley. Other theories include complex interactions between electromagnetic waves and dust, which could explain the light's unique shapes and colors. Saharan dust, which once even made its way to parts of the UK and left a red layer on cars, is full of naturally magnetic materials. On September 7, 2023, some folks noticed their cars were covered in reddish flecks because of the dust blown from the Sahara. A video making the rounds on Facebook showed someone using a magnet to lift the dust off their car. One commenter even got pretty heated, saying, "If you want to know what fell down last night, just grab a magnet and check this out," insisting it was metal, not sand. Naturally, this sparked chatter about how the dust's magnetic properties could be linked to chemtrails. But guess what? Experts are clear that magnetism is actually normal for Saharan dust. According to Professor Barbara Marr from the Center for Environmental Magnetism and Paleomagnetism at Lancaster University, the dust carries a mix of particles from the African ground and some air pollution as it heads to Europe and the UK. The red color is due to hematite, a weakly magnetic mineral. Sure, the dust can pick up some human-made magnetic particles along the way, but scientists say those are usually way less abundant than the naturally occurring ones. The whole chemtrails idea, which suggests planes are intentionally spraying harmful substances, is based on conspiracy theories that have been thoroughly debunked. In short, the presence of magnetic particles in Saharan dust, like that of hematite giving its reddish tint, doesn't back up the chemtrail theory at all. Not having the internet in 2024 seems sorta abnormal, right? When we talk about internet access, it primarily comes down to wired connections, mobile networks, and satellites. Fiber optic cables connect most of the world, except Antarctica, and many small islands. Mobile networks are also widespread. Even in remote areas like the Sahara, you might find patchy access. For people in rural spots, satellite internet is often the best bet, even if it's slower. Still, there are a few truly isolated spots left. Deep caves like Georgia's Kerbera Cave are internet-free due to their depth. And under the ocean, signals struggle to get through, making internet access poor or non-existent. When you mention your plans to travel to Tristan da Cunha, the chances are your friends won't even know where this remote island is located. No wonder. Tristan da Cunha is considered the most remote inhabited archipelago in the world, with the nearest populated land, St. Helena, around 1,500 miles away. There are only 229 people living on Tristan da Cunha now. In such a close-knit community, everyone is someone's cousin, uncle, or maybe just a friend, but everyone knows each other for sure. There are as few as 10 last names on the island, representing just 10 families. Getting there is quite an adventure. There are no airports on the island, which means your journey will be primarily by sea. Typically, it requires a days-long voyage from South Africa. Only 3 ships regularly service the island, with fewer than a dozen trips each year. Some cruise lines may include it in their itineraries, but travel arrangements must be made well in advance, due to limited berths available on the ship from Cape Town. And you'll also need landing permission. While Tristan doesn't have traditional hotels, there are several guest houses, and you might also have the chance to stay with a local family. They will provide you with a place to sleep, 3 meals a day, and laundry services. 88% of what you pay goes directly to the island family, and only 12% is tax. By the way, the accommodation is surprisingly affordable. It was around £65 for a full board in 2024. Yep, they do use sterling, being a part of overseas British territory. But there's also this local currency called St. Helena Pound, used at parity with sterlings. By the way, it's only been around 80 years since the island started using actual money. In 1942, the naval station began paying cash wages, and it helped Tristan Islanders to move from a barter economy to a cash-based system, and allowed them the novelty of making their first cash purchases. Just a heads up, pack everything you might need before you go, as you definitely won't come across Walmart there. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a supermarket and all, but it's just not the way you're used to, with endless shelves displaying endless oversized mayo jars. Tristan's Island store, often referred to as the supermarket, lacks plate glass windows and flashy advertisements, and let's be honest, it looks like an abandoned barn from the outside. Still, it plays a crucial role in providing essential goods to complement locally produced foods and woolens. If a resident wants to buy something, they must place orders months in advance for items that arrive with incoming ships. The store operates Monday through Friday. Today, the islanders continue to cultivate their own crops and raise livestock. The supermarket has become a vital source for other essentials like flour, sugar, and a variety of groceries including frozen bread and products typical of the UK or South African supermarkets. And even though the island's economy relies heavily on fishing, especially rock lobsters, islanders are largely self-sufficient. Let's move to another destination that's super hard to reach, but this time it's a level up in difficulty. I'm talking about the notorious Hypoxia City, the place with the smallest amount of oxygen on the planet. Sure thing, it's a nickname. The real name is La Rinconada. This place is located in Peru. Getting there means climbing over 16,000 feet up into the mountains. And what did you expect from the highest city on Earth? Despite its hard-to-reach location, it houses way more people than Tristan da Cunha, between 30,000 and 50,000. And while the island in the middle of nowhere looks idyllic, the Peruvian city of La Rinconada has very different looks. The urban layout features predominantly low-rise residences, where essential services are limited. La Rinconada is without a reliable supply of running water and lacks a sewage system. The community does not have a waste collection service, which forces residents to either burn or bury their garbage. Moreover, up until the early 2000s, La Rinconada did not have access to electricity. Most things, including the most essential foods, must be brought here from outside. Despite originally being a minor city, right now it has a wider range of activities to make your living. Some people are busy with trading, food, clothes, you name it. Others provide services, and some people even open public restrooms. Architectural-wise, La Rinconada has very little to offer. The pattern is quite predictable. Huts made from corrugated metal that are unstable and rusting. The choice of materials is dictated by practicality. These metal sheets are the lightest and easiest for miners to transport to the glacier. Unfortunately, the homes lack proper insulation, leaving residents shivering in the cold even though they have access to wool from local sheep, which is an excellent insulator. Sturdier rock homes exist but are rare, typically inhabited by wealthier miners. While the architecture might not be particularly captivating, the vistas certainly are. In nearly every spot in La Rinconada, a glance upward reveals La Bella Durmiente, or Sleeping Beauty, a massive glacier towering over the town. Getting to La Rinconada is very hard. First, you'll need to fly into Alejandro Velasco Astete International Airport in Cusco, Peru. Once you're in Cusco, you can catch a train or a bus to Puno, which is right by Lake Titicaca. Here's where it gets a bit tricky. The only way to really get up to La Rinconada is by hitchhiking or finding a ride into the mountains. There might be some buses, but they don't run on a set schedule. If you're up for it, you can rent a car, but be warned, the roads can be pretty rough and tricky to navigate. So a little extra caution goes a long way on this adventure. Unlike Tristan da Cunha, where they adopted cash back in the 1940s, La Riconada doesn't rely much on it. The economy of this place is based mainly on gold mines. The mines are unguarded, unregulated, and often dangerous. Miners work for 30 days under a cachorreo system, where on the 31st day, they're allowed to take as much ore from the mine as they can carry as a form of payment. La Riconada has no bank, but it has many storefront fund transfer agencies, which miners use to wire money to their families. Still, they never know how much they're gonna send. Our next destination is Svalbard, a place that might seem unwelcoming due to its climate. But locals embrace everyone with open arms. No visa is required if you want to visit or even work there. Located near the top of the world, Svalbard offers a unique and remote charm. The capital, Longyearbyen, is home to a fascinatingly diverse community, with over 50 nationalities represented among its 2,400 residents. You might even spot a polar bear wandering into town on occasion. The living space is compact. There's just one grocery store, and the streets are numbered instead of named, adding to the town's distinctive feel. Longyearbyen also boasts a university center with around 300 students. Interestingly, every student must learn to use firearms for safety in the surrounding wilderness. Originally, it was founded as a mining town, just like La Riconada, but the focus has shifted mainly to tourism. However, a quirky tradition remains from its mining days. Visitors and residents alike take off their shoes when entering hotels and restaurants, a practice born out of the need to keep coal dust at bay. The last destination for today is Palmerston Island, a remote coral atoll in the Cook Islands, located about 290 miles northwest of Rarotonga. Famous traveler James Cook visited it on June 16, 1774, and the place was uninhabited at the time, despite ancient graves found there. Today, the island supports a small population of just 25 residents, primarily descendants of 19th century English sailor William Marsters. Marsters arrived in 1863 with 2 Polynesian wives and later added a third. He fathered 23 children. Fishing is the mainstay of the local economy, resembling subsistence living due to the island's isolation. Modern amenities and communication services are available